Okay, looks like I'm live at this point. I hope the lighting is better than the test I had yesterday. It might be a little bit bright in here. So I can see um, some people in the chat already. If you, because this is the first time I'm really going live here, let me know that you can hear me. Um, there we go. Okay, I can see that I'm being heard. So let me just start off by sort of saying a few things about 2023, about the exam coming up. I imagine out there right now are two broad groups of candidates: those that have done level two, looking to go to level three, and looking for a little bit of advice on how to orient yourself for the level three exam, and retakers for level three as well. The February registration window closes on Tuesday, November 8th, which isn't really a lot of time. If you're a retaker, you may be thinking about November 8th. If you're not, if you're level two going to level three, I kind of think that I would encourage August. February is, I mean, really, you've got maybe three months before you've got to go into review mode. I just don't know that that would be enough time. You'd have the clock working against you the whole time. Plus, you're coming up on the holidays as well, which is going to take time away from you. For those that are retaking, I think it really comes down to where your minimum passing score, well, not your minimum passing score, where your score was in relation to the MPS. If you're very, very close, there's no change in content in 2023 versus 2022. So it's not as if you have to learn something new. Maybe 3 months is just enough time to get through what you need to get through. And then there's within the retakers, there is a group that have tried numerous times and still isn't getting there. So we've got some things for you, but only for the August exam. So what I'm going to do is, as I go along, I'm going to go through the chat. I'm just going to scroll through and answer questions in order as they come up. Maybe if you throw out the questions that you have, I'll get to them as I answer the questions. I'll probably end up talking about everything that I need to talk about here at the right time. So let's see what we have here. Let's see. Looking for advice. Very low command. Okay, so let's start with any advice for retakers. And this is hard advice to give because I don't know what your process was. The level one exam is really declarative. In other words, when we say declarative, it's a lot of declarative knowledge. So you can relate to level one the same way you would have related to almost any introductory undergrad course for a topic. Just level one happens to be really big, but it covers a little bit on a bunch of different topics. But it is primarily declarative knowledge. Level two is a lot of application, a lot of process because it's evaluation level. Level three is a higher level of thinking. It's more along the lines of evaluation and synthesis. So there is a context given, and there could be 3 or 4 possible answers, and your answer will depend on the context. So there is a sort of evaluation you have to do. You get less of that at level one. So level three does require a different learning orientation than you had in level one and level two. And level three is probably the closest to application than level one and level two. Most of the stuff at the first two levels you would find in introductory or intermediate textbooks on fixed income valuation, equity valuation. Some of the things at level three, you don't really find in textbooks. It's more of a practitioner world at level three. There's a lot more that's applied. And because it's applied, there's a lot more that's ambiguous. There's a lot more that requires evaluation. So should you do this? Well, it depends. What's my setup? What's the scenario that I find myself in? If it's this scenario, I should do this. If it's that scenario, I should do this. So it requires you to first evaluate something and then make a decision. Level 1 usually just has a question set up and you get an answer. So when we talk about the types of questions and the type of thinking at level 3, it's very rare that your answers are one cognitive step away. Usually it's at least 2 cognitive steps away, where you're telling me this, which means this. Now I'm ready to answer the question. So you have to first make your evaluation and then you answer the question. So if you don't start thinking about the content in that way, if you don't start learning it at level 3 in that particular way, when you get to the exam, you might find that you are still answering linearly, one cognitive step, in which case you're probably missing some subtlety that was in the context that you needed. So it does require a different approach. On my YouTube channel, there is a video for level 3, and I think it's called Level 3 Requires a Different Learning Approach, something like that. Or you can go to playlists and look in the level 3 folder for playlists, and you'll find a bunch of videos for that, where I break it down based on Bloom's taxonomy of where you should be thinking and how you should be thinking about level 3. For the multiple retakers, clearly there's something wrong with the process. There's something wrong with the way that you're learning the content. I don't know what it is, because it's hard. There's no one generalization that you can make. But what we will have for the August exam, and this is only open to multiple retries. In other words, the August exam will be at least your 3rd attempt, if not your 4th. But it's not just your 2nd attempt, but at least your 3rd attempt. There'll be small group sessions with me to try to uncover exactly what it is that we're missing, or how to think about a certain scenario in a way that shows you the subtlety or the ambiguity that would exist in the types of questions that you would get. So there'll be more smaller group sessions that I can then sort of tease out exactly what you're seeing when you look at something, and if there's something I can do to sort of make that vision a little bit wider for what you're seeing. And those 8 sessions will happen before the drop-in sessions begin at the end of July and into August. Haven't quite figured out what the schedule looks like, but we are thinking it's 8 weeks, probably an hour and a half a week, so it's an extra 12 hours. It'll be available to our subscribers who are on, and when I say our subscribers, even if you didn't write level 3 with us the first couple of times, if you have to be a subscriber to access this, I guess is what I'm saying. Let's see if we have any questions that have popped up here. Let's see. I'm very low on my score, but I still registered for February. I keep studying after I went through all the material again for the 4th time, answering all questions. Okay, let me say something about this. The focus on redoing it. Whenever I am having conversations, with people who are on a multiple retry, my first question is, well, tell me what you did. And it always runs along the same lines. Well, I went through all the questions. I went through the Q bank. I went through this. I did that. I did this. I did these, mock exams from this source and from this source and from that source. And it's a list of quantity. It is, I would say, less about quantity and more about the quality of what you're doing. So going through mock exam after mock exam after mock exam saying, I can't seem to get my score above 60. Well, what about the next one makes you think that you would get it above 60 without some intervention? So you should have the testing itself. A good analogy is this. Let's say that you're going to the gym trying to lose weight, and you get on the scale. 10 minutes later, you get on the scale. 10 minutes later, you get on the scale. And you just keep getting on the scale. You say, I keep weighing myself. I keep measuring myself, and I'm not losing any weight. It's because there's no intervention in between. Doing mock exams and Q banks is measuring yourself. It's just a measurement. You're measuring your knowledge. Without interventions in between, you're just measuring the same level of knowledge, just with different questions. But unless you increase that thing in your head that holds the knowledge, which these exams and these quiz banks are trying to capture a measurement of that thing that we can't observe. Unless you do something to change that, any measurement tool you take will keep measuring, keep telling you it's the same measurement. So it's not about doing more mock exams. I don't know that that's going to get you there. It's about the quality of the preparation that you take. So a good example of quality learning would be, let's say that you get to, and I'll pick the more difficult topic that people tend to have trouble with, which is fixed income. Immunization tends to give a bit of a problem, and credits, portfolio management when it comes to credits tends to be a little bit challenging as well. Thinking in terms of the spreads and thinking in terms of as the CDS, especially working with CDS, tends to be challenging. That rather than doing question after question after question, sometimes it's better if you try to explain it to an invisible other person and imagine them not getting it, saying, well, what is this? I don't get it. I don't get it. And you have to keep trying to find new ways to explain it. Or working in a group, 2 or 3 people, so that you can share your understanding of something and somebody can say, well, I have this picture and you have that picture and I have this picture. But when you start talking together, you start to build a more complete picture where everybody has some missing pieces of the puzzle. You'll never learn more about something than when you have to teach somebody else something. That's quality. But just to hop on the scale every 10 minutes to weigh yourself isn't going to get anything done. It's about the quality of your intervention that will change the measurement that you take. So I would, if you're just saying, look, I'm running through these Q banks all the time, and I'm not progressing anymore, it's because you're measuring the same thing. I don't know that quantity is really what's necessary at level 3. For something that's declarative, quantity makes a lot of sense because it's repetition. You got to hear it again and again and again. But when you have to make evaluations, it's a deeper dive into a single topic as opposed to a whole bunch of repetitive questions so that you can drill it into your head. It's hard to drill the interaction of context and pathway into your head because the context can change. And depending on the context, your answers can change with that. So to try to remember every possible scenario there is difficult, as opposed to just understanding the drivers that would drive a particular answer. With that, you kind of need communication with someone else. A good example of this is university. In your first year university, most of your classes are lecture style classes because most of that knowledge is declarative knowledge. You can get by without a lot of discussion on it. But once you get to year 3 and year 4, your final years, you find that there's less of a textbook focus and more of a case study focus because the real world is messy. You need to see a whole bunch of different contexts, and then you need to synthesize everything you know and say, based on this context, I think this is the appropriate way to go. So level 3 is more like that. Level 3, if this were taught in university and level 3 was year 4, it would be a lot heavier on the case study method than the textbook method. And I think CFA has done a good job in at the end of the readings, at the end of the books. Now they have 3 individual case studies that really expose you to the messiness of the world. So as you're reading the case studies, you have to try to extract those things out. I think those are great things to go through, because if you remember back to university, think of something that you can remember. One thing that even me, I did my MBA some 30 some years ago. I can still remember some of the case studies we did in the capstone course for the MBA, the policy and strategy course. I still remember some of the case studies that, because it was a story, it was embedded in something that was real. But I can't remember a chapter from a textbook and any list that I memorized. That's all gone. Everything that we can remember well is usually wrapped up in a narrative. So, the case study method at level 3 that they're introducing, I think is a step in the right direction. But yeah, I would strongly encourage you to focus less on quality and more on quantity. Let's see where we left off on that one. Okay. And I may miss some of the questions because I have to keep scrolling. Let's see. How does a focus on portfolio management with individual specifics about a client situation change how you approach and answer questions? How does the focus on... Well, for this one here, the most common setups for these types of questions when we're dealing with individuals is there are, you want to get a hold of what their investment objective is, and you want to get a hold of what their level of risk tolerance is. That's usually the big setup for individuals. There's not a lot of focus on the the style of investment, whether it be liability driven or asset liability management in that particular sense. It's very goals based. So you have to, it's the identification of what are your goals, what's the investment objective associated with this goal, and what's your level of risk tolerance. And every individual is going to be along a spectrum somewhere. So most of the questions for individual PM are set up such that you are identifying what the primary goal of that individual is, what investment objective aligns with that primary goal. Maybe you're doing a capital sufficiency analysis for a specific goal, and you're assessing risk tolerance. And in the narrative, you might be given conflicting information. You might be given some information that says, well, this suggests low risk tolerance, but this suggests high risk tolerance, because nothing is really clear cut. So a good type of question setup for individual PM would be, here's some words. Identify two characteristics that suggest above average risk tolerance and two that suggest below. And you would have to try to pick out from that reading, well, this tells me it's this and this suggests it's that. So it's never just, a question of, this person wants A, B, and C, write the investment objective, where you're given everything completely. That you'd have to have some kind of analysis of the question to determine what the answer, or what type of answer matches the type of question being asked. I think I got that. I'm not too sure if I explained that well. Will you offer a preparation for CFA ESG? Probably not. And I can answer that much later, but probably not. How to work through videos and readings. The curriculum is necessary, or can we read from Kaplan in your video? Okay, so what I can do is I can explain to you how I approach something new if I'm learning something new. I don't try to learn it on my first pass, unless it's easy. So as I if there's a reading that I have to get through where the subject matter is, well, I simply just don't know anything about this. If it's easy and I'm reading it and I'm learning it, well, there we go. But if it's not, I don't stop and try to figure out each and every single sentence. That's not the goal of the first pass. The first pass is to get a general overview of everything that is in there. So I'm going to read it, even if I don't quite understand. As I turn the page and read the next one, turn the page, I still have, some confusion in my head going, I'm not quite sure what's going on. It doesn't matter. I fight my way all the way to the end. Very light first pass, and then I go away. Because your brain will work on problems. Whenever you have something that doesn't quite fit, if you walk away from the problem, your brain still continues to work on it. Many times you will stop thinking about something only to suddenly realize 3 hours later or 4 hours later, when you're doing something completely unrelated, that's it right there. So let your subconscious do a lot of the heavy lifting for you. Introduce yourself to the topic and then walk away. So let's say that you're going to do a particular reading and you have a video available. Watch the video. And, don't worry about making notes. Don't worry about understanding everything along the way, but actively listen, but watch the video and then walk away. And then do your second pass later, where it's slower, where it's more careful listening or more careful reading. And when you do it the second time, you're coming to it with a whole bunch of questions in your head. You're coming into it with a whole bunch of puzzles in your head going, I'm missing something here and I'm missing something there. When you read something with a list of questions already in your head, you read it differently than when you read something with no questions in your head. Because if you don't have any questions in your head, you don't know which sentences are important. You don't know which ones are going to jump out at you. But if you read something with questions already in your head, as you're reading it, those answers will jump out at you. You say, there it is. There's that. I missed it the first reading. Well, because when you're learning something new, you're not sure which sentences are the important ones and which ones are the less important ones. So you're not quite sure exactly what your mind should attach itself to. And you can't labor over every single sentence. You have to have some view of the whole, and then your second pass, you fill it in. If it's still not done on your third pass, you just go to those particular sections that you want. So you're going to commit to at least 2 passes. Your first one is just, you're not trying to do anything more than just get a really big picture of what's going on, and you're just going to walk away after it's done and let your mind work on it. Then when you come back and you watch it again or you read it again, you'll find that a lot of things start flashing for you where you start saying, okay, that fills in that piece, that fills in this. Whatever's left over, well, there you would have to look for a little bit more. So after my second pass, if I still had issues and I couldn't solve them with what I had, that was time to go to Google and do a Google search and look for credible sources. Because sometimes you can read the same sentence with different words, and just the way somebody else writes that sentence, you would say, okay, now that you said it that way, I get it. And then you go back to the first sentence and you say, okay, I see that it's saying the same thing, but I wouldn't have known it unless I already knew it. That's, pretty common in textbook writing, even with good textbook writers, that not everyone is going to get every single point. Sometimes we need to hear it in a different way. Let's see. How do I prepare for behavioral finance? So behavioral finance is a very, I'm not going to say subjective. It's a less objective topic. Sometimes coming with a lot of interpretation that unless you work with it on a consistent basis, it's, you have a high level understanding of what the behavioral issues are. We're all affected by behavioral issues, whether it be emotional or whether it be some way that we process information, we're not processing it completely. Those two are easy to figure out. The difference between being emotionally invested in a decision and cognitively just not processing information correctly. So something like, not paying attention to base rates. Well, that's a information processing problem that once we learn the idea of, well, how do we figure out what base rates are? We know that. We can fix that. But emotional issues are very, very hard to fix because a good example is, have you ever tried to reason with anybody who's angry, right? I mean, once emotions show up, they're very hard to fix. So for emotions, you tend to say, why don't we just get out of the way of these emotions? So you tend to adapt to those emotions. So those are the two big schools that you can divide. Once you get into the type of bias that there is, that can be open to interpretation. The literature on behavioral biases, the CFA readings, I think, give you 9 or 11 of them, but the behavioral bias literature literally has hundreds of different biases, all with different names, with groups of them all sounding like it's the same thing. So when you're trying to say, well, is it this or is it this or is it this? It comes down, I feel sometimes, to interpretation, is how you're interpreting what you're reading. So it is very subjective. And because it's subjective, for me to ask a question about it, I must be blatant. I must be very, very clear what I'm asking, such that there could be no ambiguity on your part. So behavioral finance questions tend to be written very blatantly. So in preparing for behavioral finance, I would be very clear on the difference between cognitive versus emotional. understanding that I want to get out of the way of emotions, but I can teach you how to process information better. Within them, there are different types of biases. I'd be aware of what their names are and a good definition of what they are, but I wouldn't labor too much over how do I tell the difference, the subtle differences between this and this. Any question you'll be asked will be blatant and more top level in that respect. That you're probably your first step is to say, is this an emotion or is this a cognitive issue? And if it's emotion, okay, well, then I know that these are emotional biases. If it's cognitive, I know what these are. And I think that, there's probably an element, and I hate saying the word, but there's probably an element of memorization involved in behavioral finance because it's just not something you bump up against in the market very often. You are aware of it introspectively in yourself that you may be subjected or subject to certain biases. But professionals very rarely get emotional, so we don't really have to worry too much about our emotional biases. We just have to worry about our information processing biases. But when you work in teams, that tends to get minimized because your bias is counterset by my awareness. Let's see, low compared to MBS, but not working at the moment, so ample time at hand. Yeah, as long as you have time. Here is the thing about how I want you to orient yourself, or how I want you to think about this journey that you're on. All too often, the outcome is set as the goal. And when you're in what I would call a marathon, you can't look at the completion as your goal because it's so far away. And level 3 is not your goal. You still have a whole career ahead of you. It's a milestone along the way, but it's not really a goal. The goal is the process that you go through. So have discipline. Have a very clear process of what you're going to do. How are you going to approach each reading? You know that you're going to do at least 2 passes for each reading. Maybe you're going to use some other learning techniques like, the common one, especially for material which has some subtlety to it, is a pair and share. Usually you'll work with someone else and you'll say, okay, well, here's my understanding of what's going on here. The other person will listen and say, okay, that's my understanding as well. Once you both have the same definition, you're pretty on track. But if you have different interpretations or you're different and you're not really meeting up, then it's the back and forth, the talking back and forth will get you closer. And then when that conversation is over, your mind reflecting on the conversation later will fill in things. So you may have different learning techniques that you use. The process is your goal. Your goal is to stick to the process. The outcome takes care of itself. So I use the analogy of the gym a lot. You go to the gym and you say, I want to look like that guy over there. He's benching, 350. I want to bench 350. Well, he didn't just start benching 350. And if your goal is to bench 350, how are you going to get there? Your goal is the process. If you're going to go, you're going to have a 4-day work schedule where you're going to rotate over 4 days, 1 day off, 4 days, 1 day off. You're going to go in the mornings for this, late at night for this. That's your goal, so that every day you have a check mark. I met my goal today. I met my goal. So you have all these small victories along the way. Nothing is more motivating than victory. But if you have your goal, I'm going to pass this exam, and you have to do all of this work to get there. It's this one goal that's so far away that it sometimes can be demotivating and demoralizing. You have to know how you're going to get there. And once you determine how you're going to get there, what you're going to do to get there, the process itself becomes the goal. And then you work that process so that you have these victories every day. Let's see. Recording for this. YouTube automatically records these, so I don't actually have to record any of this at all. I'm trying to stick with where I was in the questions here. Do you have an approximate recommended number of study hours for level 3? No, I don't, and I'll tell you why. Is one of the most good word I'm looking for here, common, one of the most common distributions in social systems is a normal distribution. It's very common. Uh, it's very well documented that our intellectual ability is normally distributed across the population, that our ability to learn has a normal distribution. But what doesn't have a normal distribution is who knows what. That doesn't have a normal distribution. So when you take that normal distribution, there is an average. And you get to that average, the CFAI gets to that average by the exit polls when you leave the exam. How many hours did you study on average? And everybody gives their estimate. And they say, of the ones who passed, they reported an average of this many hours. What they don't report is the distribution. Okay, so the average is the average. If you are a fast learner, you will be in the left tail because you'll say, well, it only took me 180 hours. If you are a slower learner, you may be in the right tail. It may take you 400, 500, 600. So to give you an average is to suggest that you are yourself average. You can know what anybody else knows. It may take you 1 hour and it may take somebody else 3, or it may take you 3 while it takes everyone else 1. So it really comes down to, it takes the time it takes for you to say, I get it. It just takes the amount of time it takes. And it has to be your measurement of time, not the average. That's, again, the difference between quality and quantity. When you work towards a target and you say, but I put in 300 hours. Well, maybe you needed 400 to get to the same level as somebody else, to know it the same way that somebody else knew it. All right. Any advice on ethics and GIPS? So you're level 3. This is not your first dance with ethics. You've seen it before. It really should be secondhand for you at this point. So when you're going through it for the third time, it should be, you should say, well, look, I've seen all of this before. It's the same code and standards at all 3 levels. So however you did at level 1 and 2, do the same thing for level 3. For GIPS, nice thing about it is it used to be about 100-page reading. Now it's about 40 to 50 pages. It's really shrunk down. So digesting GIPS is not that difficult. And I will say, on a logical basis, GIPS is far more logical in my mind. If I didn't know what the standards were, I could say, here's where we would need a standard. And GIPS sort of fits in that. Whereas ethics sometimes isn't quite logical, and sometimes it's not very intuitive. That you really have to think through something first and say, well, why would that be an ethical issue? And you really have to let it sit with you for a while to go, okay, I think I understand now why. I can see where that would cause this conflict or give the appearance of something like that in this respect. But with GIPS, it seems a little bit more objective on that one. So for GIPS, it's nicer this year because it is less than it was before. Strategy for retakers. And there it really comes down to, like I say, what was your score versus the MPS? If you were close, meaning that your range, your 95 percentile, that's the blue bar. If it looks like it included the MPS, what that's saying is that there is statistically, 95% probability, statistically, no difference between your score and the minimum passing score because your 95% range included the MPS, which means that you really just need to lean into it a little bit more. Raise your score 5% in each section and you're good. So for those that had that were straddling the MPS on that respect, I would say, I don't know that there's much different that I would change other than use some of the learning techniques that I talked about previously, as opposed to relying on just, well, I'm going to do more of this, I'm going to do more of that, I'm going to run through these videos and the review videos some more. Instead of doing that, engage with other candidates in a discussion. So on our site, under every video, there are a bunch of candidate questions. And we really pulled back from answering those, because in answering them, we're taking away an opportunity for other candidates to answer them. That is part of a learning process, is if you can open-endedly answer somebody else's question, then if it's given to you in a multiple choice format, you should be able to answer it if you can open-endedly answer it. And it also is sort of purifies your knowledge as well, because when you answer the question, somebody else may come along and say, well, no, it's more like this, that you may think that you knew the answer to it until somebody showed you that, well, what you think you understand is off just a little bit. That's quality. When you go a little bit deeper into one little topic and you see it clearer, it's not just the one topic that you see. When you see that one clear, you start to see the connections to other things. Other areas start to light up as well. So it's not like, well, I don't want to spend a whole bunch of time really getting in to the CDS pricing. But if you get that, you'll get a whole bunch of this other stuff about the spreads. You'll get a whole bunch of that other stuff about when to position yourself in credits for changes in rates, because you'll understand how the spreads change and how the payoffs change on that. So it gives you clarity in a bunch of other sections as well. I think I answered that question, right? So yeah, for retakers, if you're close, February is good. Do more of the same, but add a little bit more of that interaction, where you're interacting with someone else, or you're interacting with the content, or you're just doing a deeper discussion on a topic to really flesh out all the things, all the little things. And some topics have little nuances that it does take time reflecting and discussing to get to that nuance. If your your band does not include the minimum passing score, that means that statistically speaking, your score is statistically different than the minimum passing score. Well, for there, if you say to me, I did everything I could, and here's where I am, then I would say, well, the stuff you were doing was just the wrong stuff. Yes, maybe you had quantity in that, but if we could just nudge you over and make you think about things a little bit differently. That this is not declarative knowledge. You're not going to memorize your way through this exam. I gotta get you away from reciting what you've read to discussing, be able to hold a discussion and understand the nuances, and be able to understand all the advantages and disadvantages of what you're doing based on what context that we're in. You have to be able to sort of see it more like a messy case study. It could be that. It could be that you're studying for your level 3 exam the same way you studied for your level 1 and level 2, and it's not going to work. Or it could be that you say, well, I only put in this much time. There is a group of you out there who did not pass level 3, who are fully aware that, oh no, well, I let the ball go. I know I started late. I didn't have the time that I needed. I rushed through this. I rushed through that. There you recognize that you just didn't put in the time. That's the one magic formula, right? Putting in the time. Do you have an approximate? Okay, what do you think of the mix of essays with multiple choice? Okay, that's a good question. What do I think of the mix? I think it's a good idea. When the CFAI used to give you your results in terms of how you did on the AM and PM, they don't do that anymore. They just give you the section. Invariably, it was the AM exam that was the problem. And it was quite common for people to say, I ran out of time. I left question 9 and 10 blank. I didn't even get to question 8 even. Whereas with the PM, I finished with 40 minutes to spare, or I finished with half an hour to spare. If you could just use that half hour on the AM stuff, but can't let you because, well, you had a break in between and I don't know what you looked at. So how are we going to get this done? How can we allow you? I mean, the exam is 4.5 hours. It seems I'm stealing time from you in half the exam where you have extra time. The way to get that done is to, like a deck of cards, interleave all of the questions. So you have AM, PM, AM, PM. And this way here, the time you save on these PM questions, you have more time for the AM. I think that's a good move. I don't think it changes how you would answer AM questions. It just gives you more time so that you don't run out of time, because it's quite common to run out of time. I applaud that move. I think it's a fantastic move. Weird to hear his voice at 1 times speed. I can talk faster if you like. Let's see. Okay, good. Already did this. Already did that. Did that. Can any reading topic be asked on structured response questions? Yes. Now, this is based on CFAI correspondence and what they say. Anything is fair game. If it's in the curriculum, it's fair game for AM and PM. However, I will say this, having written many structured response questions in my time, and structured response questions even before I started doing any CFAI work, because it's a very common question setup to use on exams. There are some topics that are brutally difficult to write a structured response question, because here's the characteristic of a structured response question. It has to hold true to certain things. Number one, it has to be 100% possible or probable that everybody gets the same answer. Cannot have 10 different answers. You can't write a question where, depending on how you think about it or the assumptions that you make, you'll get a different answer. There can be no assumptions beyond the words that are written, and it must be written in such a way that everybody can get the same answer, and there must be one answer or a selection of answers, that there may be 2 possible answers, but you're only expected to give 1, or there are 3 possibilities, but it says select 2, or determine and justify with 2 reasons. They must be objectively, or they must objectively exist, that everyone would agree, or any expert would agree, that yes, those are the only possible answers to this question. And it is 100% probable that if you know what you're doing and you read this, you would arrive at any one of those 2 or any one of those 3. However, it is impossible and improbable to expect everyone to use the same words. So the model answer that's given is called a model answer. It is the message for the grader. The grader looks at your question for the same message, not the same word. That being said, ethics is brutally difficult to write a structured response question to, such that everyone would get the same answer. The only way to get it done is to write it so obviously as to be a test of nothing, or to use so many words, because you got to shut down every other possibility that it could be, because you got to shut down all assumptions, you got to shut down all the possibilities, that the question gets so long, it's not a structured response question anymore. So they work better in setups where there's multiple choice. They just don't work well as a structured response. And I don't know, of all the past AM exams, if I've ever witnessed an ethics question on the AM, because somebody has to write it. Somebody has to write the question. And I consider myself quite good at writing these things. And if I was given the task of writing an ethics question for the AM, it would be brutally frustrating to do, because every time I think I'd be done, somebody could come along and say, well, it could be this, couldn't it? And I'd have to go, oh, I didn't shut down that possibility. Now I got to add words to shut down that possibility, or expand the number of answers that there could possibly be, which violates the first principle, which is there must be 100% probability of everybody getting the same answer. So if I were a betting person, and I am, I would bet that I wouldn't see ethics on the AM. That's one thing. As for all the others, I think they've all shown up on the AM to some extent. Let's see, got that. I got that. How to train for the written part. Okay, so the written part is fairly straightforward. Every answer, these are structured responses. They're not essay. They're I think the term essay has been extremely misleading because through university, we get the idea that an essay has a certain structure. It has a couple of arguments, an introduction, a conclusion, and it's wordy. We write words and we demonstrate to the author that we know this stuff. AM questions, you should take no time in the question to teach the grader the answer. Your job is to tell the grader the answer. That's it. So if your choices are A, B, C, and you're saying the answer is A, you don't have to then say A is got these qualities. This word means that, and this means that, and because of this, it's that. You don't have to teach the grader anything about the answer in that sense. Your job is to answer the question, which means you're telling the grader the answer. Every answer is going to be 1 to 2 bullet points maximum. You don't need proper sentences, and I wouldn't use proper sentences in there either. Your grammar and your spelling are not graded. It cannot possibly be 5 bullet points because that would require a number of steps. The more cognitive steps you have, the more that tree can branch of all the possible answers that it can be. So it cannot be that, well, you said this, which means this, and this leads me to 2 options, and this one I can discard. So it's this option, which leads to these 3 things, which must be this. You'll never get something that works through a decision tree that much. There'll be an evaluation of the context, and because of this context, it means this. It'll be those 2 steps away, which means you need 1 to 2 bullet points max, and you're not teaching the grader the answer, you're telling the grader what the answer is. So as far as training for the written part, you're training on brevity. You're getting to the point and you're telling the grader the answer. If you have a subscription on our site, we do, I don't know how many hours, 3, 6, 12, 18, almost 40 hours live of exam walkthroughs where we walk through every AM question and we look at the structure of the question. What are the words that are being asked? What does our answer look like? What's the length of our answer? What the grader is looking for? What the message in the answer is without paying attention to the words. Your words and your words and your words and yours will all be different. Me as the grader, I'm saying, are you saying the same thing as my model answer, but you're just using different words? Then fine, that's fine. So training for the structured response is first understanding what a structured response is and what it is not. It is not an essay question. It is brevity. There is one answer. Everyone's going to have the same answer and not use the same words. And you're not teaching the grader the answer. You're simply just telling the grader the answer. Okay, where are we here? Can did that. Okay, any change in ethics strategy for L3? Didn't do so well in L2. Well, I find ethics is a memorization game because as I go through ethics, and I've gone through it a number of times, trying to find something to extract, it always comes down to, well, there are some differences between them. They group nicely into the 1 through 7. They're cohesive within their groups, and they do have separation between them within the groups. But sometimes when you go from a standard in one group to a standard in another group, you read them, you say, but these are so close together. What's the difference? And sometimes it's just a little subtlety that's the difference. So it's, I seem to think that ethics is short-term memory. It is a memorization game. Short-term memory has a very fast decay rate, which means you want to put stuff in short-term memory as close to the event that you need that memory as possible. So I think that these intensive 1 or 2 day memorization drills where you have maybe 10 pages of your ethics notes and you're just drilling again and again and again and again before the exam is probably the best strategy. It's the way that I would do it because I don't find it as intuitive as other things. I can't logically conclude what ethics writes by logical analysis of a situation. because sometimes the ethics are not quite intuitive, that you have to read something and go, okay, I can see that now. I can see why that would be, but from an objective situation, you may not get there. Unless you work with it all the time. If it's something you work with, then you would have it. Let's see, what else do we have? Feel that 6 mocks isn't enough. So again, six is enough. 6 is enough. It's the quality that you go through as opposed to the quantity. I think we've covered that. How is CBT for morning any different than paper-based exam? I think now you mean how is CBT for structured response any different? The only difference is you're typing your answer in on a keyboard instead of writing it out on a piece of paper, so that if you have to change something, you could just delete and retype, as opposed to all of the crossouts that you have to do. I think that's the only difference. I seem to think typing is a lot better. You can see the answer on the screen. I much prefer that than writing out an answer. Let's see, where are we? Missed the MPS by a whisker. What should be your advice? February. Scored well in ethics and mocks, but failed the actual exam. Well, that's nowhere near enough information for me. You scored well in ethics. Oh, I see. You scored well in ethics on the mock exams, but failed ethics in the actual exam. Yeah. So again, I think I've covered that on ethics. Behavioral finance, we have ethics. Already did that. Level 3 exam for Feb. The study flow. We'll get to that shortly here. Already did that one. Did that. Did that. Did that. I usually have problems to identify the business cycle phases. Some things have some logic, but others don't for me. Yeah, so it's for that one, in that particular section, you're really just given these exhibits with these bullet points and sort of a laundry list of the characteristics that you'd expect to see in each phase. I'd be aware of the shape of the yield curve. And when we say the shape of the yield curve by phase, understand that it's not a 100% indicator of the phase that you're in, that there are times where you can have a flat yield curve and a roaring economy. You don't actually need a steepward upward sloping yield curve. You could be in a recovery phase and you don't have the steep curve, you have a very flat curve. But traditionally, when we say the shape of the yield curve, traditionally over the business cycle, there have been certain characteristics that you would expect to see in a normal business cycle. One thing I will say is, since 2008, with so much central bank involvement in fixed income markets across the world, the yield curve as an indicator, as a price of not just the time value of money, but also the inflation expectation in it, because it's so heavily manipulated, a lot of that signal disappeared in the last 15 years. So if you're going through that reading on indicators and you're saying, but none of these indicators matched anything in the last 10 years or 15 years, you're probably right that it was pre-2008, that those indicators were probably a lot better aligned to their phase of the business cycle, that you could give me a yield curve and say, here's the yield curve. What phase of the business cycle do you think you're in? And if I knew what the mid-cycle curve looked like, I could be fairly exact on where it was. But after that, it was difficult to know what cycle you were in, because the yield curve was engineered in a sense. And because it was engineered, you lost the negative correlation between treasuries and equities. They became positively correlated, and still to this day are positively correlated. So as far as identifying the phase of the business cycle, it's one of those things that unless you've worked with, it's difficult. The yield curve is a big one. Stick with the generalities of the yield curve. And if you can segment your indicators into leading, coincident, and lagging, you can ignore lagging for the most part. Pay attention to your coincident indicators. That's where you are. And your leading will tell you where the next phase is, which kind of positions you. It's just a second way to position you. Okay. What would be the optimal way to study for the essay section of the exam? And this is okay. So for that one, it goes back to what I talked about is the quality of the type of learning that you're doing. Less trying to memorize slides or trying to memorize your notes or looking up in the air and saying, okay, well, this is this and this is that, and more discussion, more about open-ended questions. So somebody asks, well, even on Reddit, if you're looking for more question banks, Reddit is the largest CFA community out there, and there are questions being asked every day. You're looking for more questions, and I mean open-ended questions where you get to discuss and engage. That's the place, that you can find a lot of that stuff as well. If you're not a subscriber on our site and you don't have the comment section below the videos, don't forget about these social forums that you can engage in. That it's like getting into a sparring match. You can learn how to box, but at some point you got to get in the ring. Well, this is getting in the ring with someone and, throwing a few to see if you can land. Okay, Retakers, when videos will be available for us, or should I use the archiving? Well, you have the archive. If you've already subscribed to us for level 3 and you need to retake, there is no fee. It's free. We extend it. If you don't pass with us, we extend it to the next, to your next exam window. So you click on my account, and on the next screen, the second item from the bottom, there's another menu. The second one from the bottom is the one you would click. It asks you to upload some documents. You upload them, and it extends you to the next window. So if you have subscribed on our site, you'll have the archive in the app, or you just extend and go to the next exam window. All of our subscriptions are 1 fee to pass, so you only pay once. Okay, where do we go? Also, how to work 80-20 rule. Okay, so for somebody who asked how to work the 80-20 rule, ask me with more words. I'm not sure exactly what you're referring to by the 80-20 rule. Maybe you're referring to that 80% of the words written on the page only mean 20% in terms of its value. I don't know. Okay, I already answered that. I'm aiming for L3, planning to start studying beginning January. Anything you would recommend to do differently for prep L3 versus L1, 2? Anything to do differently? There's where I would suggest that you look up that video just click on my channel, click on playlists. You'll find one for level 3. Click on the one for level 3, and you'll see a whole bunch of videos in there that I've done over the years about, how to think about level 3. I've tied it to Bloom's taxonomy of learning. I've done a content analysis of the type of action words in the LOSs. I've done one for the type of action words you'd expect to find on the exam. For example, the determine and justify, determine and support question setup is almost 50% of the structured response questions. Calculate only makes up about 7% of the marks based on a content analysis of so many years. So knowing the orientation, when you see determine, justify, that justification is more than just memorizing your way through. You must justify based on the context. You said this, so it must mean this. And there's your answer. You said this, it must mean this. You can't just say this, this, this. It has to flow from the context. The context tells me this. That means it's this. That's the justification, right? Do you think practice questions would add more value than theory-based learning? Well, there is you can break down learning into two parts, right? There's the discovery phase and there's the reinforcement phase. The reading the videos, the discussions that you have, that's part of the discovery phase. The questions you engage in after are part of the reinforcement phase. That if you're looking for your question bank to be part of your discovery phase, part of your initial learning, I think that's sort of the wrong thing to do. You have to have the discovery phase first, and I don't know that running right to questions would be part of a discovery phase, but it is necessary for reinforcement. Well, when I say necessary, I don't know a more effective way for reinforcement than doing something like that. And when you are doing questions, there are two types of questions. There are summative questions and formative questions. So question bank questions, at least on our site, are called formative assessments. Formative meaning they help form your understanding. They help form your knowledge. Summative, which is what you'd find on the mock exams, just evaluate what you know. So a well-written question bank will have an orientation towards formative assessment, meaning that the question should help you learn something and uncover something that you didn't know at first if you didn't know the answer. Whereas the mock exam is really just a measurement at that point. That's why it's called summative. It's the sum of what you know as opposed to forming what you know. So on your learning, you've got your discovery mode and you've got your reinforcement mode. That's where question banks and mock exams come in. In the reinforcement, you've got formative and you've got summative assessments. So don't run to question banks. Discover the knowledge first. Go to the questions. Hit question banks first because those are more likely to be formative assessments. Save your mock exams to before the exam itself. Don't use those as a learning tool because they're not written as a learning tool. They're written as a measurement tool. I hope that kind of structures your thinking around that. Can a college student with 2 years remaining give CFA 1? Yes, they can. Yes, they can. And that is changes that's happened in the last few years, but yes, they can. You can learn more about that at CFAI at cfainstitute.org directly. I cracked the exam and super sure I was going to pass. I even have enough time in prep well course. I'd assume it was the AM section. Okay, that's more of a statement. Only 12 days to sit for the exam, scoring 55 to 60 on mocks. Any tips? So you're sitting for the November exam. Is there a level 3 exam for November? Maybe you're not a level 3. I didn't think there was a level 3. Being that I'm not an employee anymore, I tend to lose track. I have my schedule of when I do the exam walkthroughs, but I don't think there's a level 3 for November. So you must be talking about another exam. 12, you're scoring 55 to 60. I would say at that point, if you're 12 days out scoring 55 to 60, you're going to want to take a topic and go deeper on it. A slower pass at this point in time. Don't race. Racing through something is not going to get you anywhere. It just uses up a lot of time, and you end up tripping over things because you're going to have a confirmation when you read. You're going to read and go, okay, yeah, I get this. Yeah, I get that. Yeah, I get this. But you're not going to get the things you don't get because you're not aware of them. So doing more exams probably is going to keep you in the range of 55 to 60. You need something you need an intervention at this point that's going to push you higher. So think of the exam as a scale that you stand on. And let's say that I've got 3 days before a fight and I'm 7 pounds above my weight class. Well, I got to do something to lose 7 pounds. I don't necessarily need to keep weighing myself if I do something to lose 7 pounds, which means you're scoring 55 to 60. You need to do something to get that score higher. You don't necessarily need to measure yourself again. So at this point, you've measured yourself. Now do your intervention and don't worry about measuring yourself again. Will you do result analysis for your subscribers, retakers? If yes, how to contact you? For this one here, because our numbers are so large, like we have thousands of level threes that wrote in August. We have big numbers. To do an analysis, even at a 6%, even assuming 6% didn't pass, is still in the hundreds. So it's just a lot to do. So what we've done is, and we started this program a couple of years ago, is we've gotten recent level 3 graduates as mentors, and at reduced rates. So if you're a subscriber, you can book a 1-hour session with one of these people, who will then go through your results with you, ask you what you did to prepare, sort of contrast it with what they did, sort of give you an idea of what worked for them, what they found didn't work. Since they've already been through the exam, they know the process, they know what you're going to face on exam day, that they can probably provide you with a lot more insight. And that is at a reduced rate. If you're a subscriber, you have access to that. They're called academic counseling sessions, and they're available through our site. So you can add an academic counseling session, and you get an hour with someone who can sort of break things down for you, saying, look, I gone through it, and I can tell you right now that thing right there, that's not important. That other thing, that's not important. But this and this and this are really important. Here's a schedule that should work for you, and help you build, something going forward. And they can analyze your results for you. When should I study for the returning level 3? That's a good question. When should you start preparing for August as a returning level 3 candidate? The content hasn't changed year over year. I think it's important, if you're going for August, I think it's important, take some time off. Take November and December off, but don't disconnect from the markets. So instead of spending 2 hours a day studying, spend 2 hours a day every morning with the Open. That's on Bloomberg from 7 to 9. That's your morning routine. You're going to watch Bloomberg 7 to 9. Don't disconnect from the markets, because when you hear the analysts on that are talking about things, and they have currency analysts, they have fixed income analysts, they have derivative analysts, they have all sorts of analysts on in the morning, you will connect it with stuff that you've learned, even if you're not involved in fixed income. And that's kind of difficult, I've never traded fixed income. I'm not a fixed income portfolio manager, but I'm expected to know this. Listening to other ones talk, you would say, I know exactly what you're talking about. And sometimes it connects something for you. Take a couple of months off. You can pick it up again in January. Oftentimes we have, a new lease on life in January, right? It's a new year, new hopes, new dreams. We make plans, and you tend to come out in the new year with this momentum behind you. So make it for the new year. Take some time off. Let your mind sort of assess what you've done. A good example of this is when I was young, when I was a teenager. I think I started when I was 14. I took a martial art. I took Shaolin Kung Fu. There are different forms of Kung Fu. I took Shaolin, and it's very artful. A lot of circular motion, but it takes years and years to develop. Whereas if you want to be very effective, very fast, you'd probably take judo, jiu-jitsu, kickboxing, boxing. Those are the combat sports where you can get very deadly, very fast. But this art form takes years to develop. It was only when I went away to university, I stopped for a period of 4 or 5 years, that it started to make sense to me, that my form became much more fluid when I stepped away from it. So allow it to happen to the same thing for level 3. Step away for it for a couple of months, and you'll find that your mind continues on and becomes more fluid for you, that when you get back to it, you'll see it flow a lot better for you. But be connected to the markets in the interim. How important is CFA for investment banking? Does it stand out? So this is a sort of a uh, an ongoing debate, I think, out there. And when I look at um, reports that are issued by different banks in terms of when they do their annual sort of capital market expectations reports. I get some of these sent to me from previous candidates saying, thought you might find this interesting. So my inbox is quite interesting. Um, when I scroll down the list, okay, they're talking about this sector, now this industry, and all the outlooks and what they have in this document. They have the authors listed at the top, invariably CFA, 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 CFA. I have a private wealth management company that manages some of my assets because, well, that's who I am these days. And when you look at the list of all of the managers that they hire, and I've got some private investments, I've got hedge funds, I've got international investments. You look at the list of the people, CFA, 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 all the way down. That whenever you're looking at lead authors or lead portfolio managers, I invariably see CFA, invariably see it. So it matters. It's there. They are, from what I can see in the samples that I've seen, overrepresented at those levels, which means it must mean something. Otherwise, you would expect to see it represented in the same proportion as it's represented in the finance community, which is rather small, considering the number of people in the investment industry and the number of charter holders. When you start looking at who PMs are and who lead analysts are, massively overrepresented with the three letters. So does it mean something in terms of, well, it just makes you better? Or does it mean something in terms of, we like people that belong in our club? The expression Harvard hires Harvard. Well, who cares? Who cares if that's what it is, right? I mean, the value of a Harvard education is not just that you have excellent professors. It's that if you want to know the graduating class of any school, those are the people to know, and you want those people to know you. So if having the three letters behind your name invites you into a club that you otherwise wouldn't be invited into because there's a fraternity, let's say, for lack of a better gender description, I'll call it fraternity, because there's this fraternity that exists. So what? Who cares how you get your advantage? It does appear to be an advantage. So I think that's about as far as I can go on that one. As far as investment banking, these are not entry-level jobs. I'll tell you that right now. Investment banking is something you do later in your career, after you've proven yourself. Well, sometimes being in the right club and having the right people know you give you the opportunity to prove yourself. And maybe these three letters are the entrance to the club that allows you to prove yourself, that allows you to later on get into one of those kind of roles. Topics important for L3 AM session. There are some that I can't see how you would pull off an AM or a PM exam for level 3 without hitting on. Immunization in fixed income covers 2 readings. I can't see how you can avoid that. The 2 readings in economics are about determining a forecasted expected return for different asset classes. I don't see how you can avoid that. There's a number of ones to use for equities, and equities seem to be the big one. There's a couple of ways to do it for fixed income as well, and for currencies. But those 2 readings are really about how would you develop an expected return forecast for a particular asset class. Don't know how you can avoid that one. Then you're going to get some PM, individual PM, and some institutional PM. And then after that, it's a smattering of, well, what could it possibly be? But the big ones, I would say that if you've got fixed income and economics behind you, I think you could right away take down 2 otherwise challenging sections. And then after that, it's fair game. anybody who would say, oh, this will be on the exam, this won't be on the exam, is just using sort of a probability based guess based on, what has appeared on past exams. So to say, well, Grenoble Kroner is a quite popular one that's appeared on past exams, so it's got higher probability. Maybe it does, but will it be on the exam? I don't know. Nobody really knows. All we can do is use our best guesses to, how much space was dedicated to it, how important does it seem to be, and also how easy is it to build a question around it. Something that's hard to write a question around usually won't have a question written around it because some human somewhere has to write it. And I sort of use myself as a benchmark that if I find the topic difficult to write a question on, other people will find it hard to write the question on, and they're just easier fights to win, right? Let's see, where are we here? This was my third attempt. I think I've taken that. Would you recommend more focus on, more focus on EOCQ questions or the CFA IQ bank for practice? My understanding is that many of the end of chapter questions make up the question bank, that they are in the question bank. So, once you do an end of chapter question, I don't know that there's much value in doing it again in terms of testing yourself. I think if you do them again, you should be taking them from the point of view of you're now explaining why the answer is the answer to somebody else. And how come the other two are not the answer? If it's multiple choice. I think that's the better way to go about it. The long examples within the reading are worth spending time on. Within the readings themselves at the very beginning, there's a whole bunch of narrative at the very beginning of these readings that CFAI puts in there. And one of the things they do say is that oftentimes those examples become the format for an exam question. Not the exact question, but the structure of the question becomes a format on which an exam question is built. So if you want a high probability of seeing a particular structure on an exam, those in-text examples, I think, have a lot of value to them. Okay, let's see. Is it possible to start from here and make it for February? If yes, what is the chance? Well, I can't answer that question. I know nothing about you. I know nothing about the time that you have. I know nothing about your learning ability, your learning speed. I know nothing. I'm blind. Is it possible? Yes, it is possible. To put a probability on it would require me to have a whole bunch more questions answered first before I can put any probability. But sure, it's possible. But I don't know if it's probable, right? Let's see. How do you recommend a build-up approach to studying for L3 by reviewing prior topics? Okay, so if you go to our site and you click on CFA, go to level 3, and you'll see the 2 package prices. Well, we only have 1 package. You'll see the package, and on this side of it, you'll see buy the section, buy the package. Right below it in orange, there's some words written there, and it says, see how past levels relate to level 3. Click on that, and you'll get a grid up of what readings in level 1 and level 2 help with level 3. Because when you get to level 3, especially for fixed income, if you have not got a very clear concept in your mind of exactly what duration is measuring, it's going to be challenging. Same with currencies. You have currency portfolio management, but if you lack the understanding of how currencies are moving and what they're exactly measuring, you might be a little bit out of touch. So there are some readings at level 1 and 2 that will help reinforce level 3. So here you go. If you're preparing for August over the next couple of months, use your archive revisit those 10 to 12 readings at each of level 1 and level 2 just to hear it again. You're not learning it again. You're just hearing it again, and you go, okay, I remember all that, and I think that'll set you up nicely for any holes you may have at level 3. I started with fixed income, but level 3 fixed income is quite hard. Are other topics just as hard? No, fixed income is, and I base it on where questions on the site cluster. So if you have 10 videos up and 4 videos have no questions under them, you sort of get the idea that, well, most people don't find those 4 videos very challenging. The one with the most questions will be the one that they find most cognitively challenging. Fixed income is at level 3 because you have, if you've never been in the fixed income marketplace, you're being introduced to 3 big concepts that you may not be able to get your head around right away. The idea of immunizing using your asset portfolio to immunize your liabilities against changes in interest rates, positioning a portfolio for changes in yield curves, and then credit portfolios, which is corporate bonds. Yeah, it can be quite challenging. Whenever you get to fixed income, there's always math. There's always numbers involved because it's very numbers driven. It's very formulaic. So it's quantitatively challenging. And if you've never, traded in fixed income, sometimes it'd be hard to get your head around exactly what you're trading here. Okay, well, hang on, if the yield curve is doing this, I'm doing this and doing this. Now, why am I doing that? And you got to remember, well, there's that inverse relationship, and then there's this duration, which measures my sensitivity. So there's a lot of moving parts in fixed income, which is why if you start early, I recommend starting there because it gives you time to reflect on it. I wouldn't save it to the end because if you got to race through it, you're not going to get it. You need time to reflect on it. Let's see. Oh, we're almost at the end of the questions here. Great. I think. Well, actually, I lost track, so I'll start from the bottom and work my way up. Any tips for time management for essay questions? Yeah. The marks that you're given, it'll tell you a high-level mark. It'll say this question is worth 15 marks. Every mark on those questions is a minute, which means that's if it's 12 marks, it's a 12-minute question. That's it. When you're reading these questions, do not read. Go right to the question first. Pay attention to the keywords. Identify, determine, justify, explain, support, calculate. Be very clear right up front. What am I expected to do here? And then you go read the question and slow down. We have this idea that it's a timed exam. And so we read fast because we're in this rush where we think we're up against the clock. You will trip over important statements. You will trip over important sentences if you read fast. If you read fast, you'll answer the question wrong, guaranteed. So just to give yourself some idea of how fast you can read at normal speed, get a stopwatch. Just get your iPhone out and open up the clock and go over to stopwatch, set it for 1 minute. And get a textbook out, not a newspaper or anything, but something that you would read where you'd have to read slower for understanding. Get the textbook out and start reading at a slow pace, like half of what you'd normally read at, and start reading until the minute is done. And once the minute is done, look how many words you've read. You will be surprised how much you can read at a slow pace, how many words you can read. When you're reading for understanding, slow down on these questions so that you make sure you're reading what you're supposed to read and that you're answering the question you're supposed to answer, and no more than 20 to 25 words per answer. That's a lot. 1 to 2 bullet points, move on. Don't teach the grader the answer. There's your time management. Okay. Do we need to read curriculum besides MM package? Okay, change the word need to, and instead of making it a question, put an exclamation mark on the end and change do we need to, oh my God, we get to read the curriculum besides package for level 3, exclamation mark. Oh my God, we get to read it. Not do we have to? Once you start saying things like that, do I have to? Then there's something missing in the passion. And I get that sometimes these readings aren't the most exciting readings in the world. They're not. Some of them are. Some of them I dislike because they're written very poorly. Some are really good. But I would feel robbed of the richness of the journey if I didn't read it. I'd want to read it and reject it. As I'm reading it, I'd want to say, okay, this is not improving anything I already know. The writing is difficult to get to. I'm not sure where the author is going, and I would reject it. But I would not want to risk missing any of the richness. So I would naturally read it until I felt that I could reject it, saying, you know what, I don't need to read it. But it would be something I would do. Let's see. Questions keep flying so quickly, I keep forgetting where I left off. If I missed your question, just go ahead and type it in again. Is there a way to be an expert in ethics? Peer representative, numerous questions to know the answer they want. Score. So, I don't know if there's a way to become an expert in ethics unless you work with ethics all the time. You could become, I think, very familiar with ethics. You can be more familiar with ethics than the person beside you. But I don't know, when you say the word expert implies some kind of experience that goes with the textbook knowledge as well. That unless you are in compliance somewhere, or you're in the department where people come to you for, hey, I have this situation, can I get some guidance? Unless you're doing that on a daily basis, I don't know that the word expert would be as appropriate as familiar with it. Tips for final 18 days for level 2. Lean into it. Just ask yourself, do you want this to be the second last time you write level 2? And lean into it. That's all I can say at this point. For retakers, when videos will be available to you? Oh, no, I've already answered that. Do you recommend this is a good time to come to Canada for study and work? Let's break that down into two parts. Do you think it's a good time to come to Canada? Yeah, I think any time is a good time to come to Canada. Canada is, I think, of all the G7 countries, probably one of the most welcoming in terms of immigration. We are, I think the new immigration levels are announced, I think, about a week ago, 500,000 a year to the end of 2025. That's 1.5 million for a country that has a population of 34 million, that you're going to increase the population by 5% over the next 3 years from immigration. That's pretty big. So yeah, I think it's well, I live here. I think it's always a good time. It's not the best country to be successful in, because you will be punished with a 53% tax rate for your troubles. But on the way there, it's not so bad. Where's your dog? Okay, so I guess I should say something about the dog. I got a puppy a while back named Pete, little Labrador puppy. It had blood in its poop, basically from the day I got it here. So about 4 days in, I took a picture of it and I sent it to the breeder, saying, what do you think is going on here? Have you, is this going on in your other puppies? It seems a little early to be incurring vet bills. And my suggestion, or at least my strong hint on that, is I think you should be paying for this. So I'm pretty sure you knew there was poop in the blood before I got it. So she said, yeah, bring it back, because they're about an hour and a half away. So I brought it back and they just gave me a refund, which was, at the time I thought, well, I didn't have enough time to get attached to the little guy. There was something wrong with it to begin with, and it just didn't seem to, oh, well, it is what it is, right? But I have a chipmunk. I didn't buy a chipmunk. There's a chipmunk that lives in the backyard. Took me all summer to gain its trust, but now it comes right into the house. I leave the back door open. It'll come right in the house. It'll walk around the house, run around the house. I can hold my hand out. It'll come and take nuts out of my hand. It's like having a pet that I don't have to walk anymore. So I like the little chipmunk. Took level 3 in September. Unfortunately, didn't pass. Second attempt on the NPS. My ethics less than 50%. Any tips on what I should change my strategy to prepare next time? I think I've covered that. I've given lots of advice on strategy. Focus on the process and add different discovery techniques other than just trying to memorize your way through or remember things. I think at level 3, because it's so close to practice, that working with somebody else, I think, adds a lot of value right away. Is it necessary to do CFA to succeed in investing? That's a good question. I have been overloading on Munger, Buffett, and very recently, and they don't respect institutes and professionals. Well, take that with a grain of salt. It's not that they don't respect. It's not that they don't respect it. It's that it on its own is no signal of anything. So here's the thing with the designation that I've seen is there are many successful people in this industry that don't have a charter. Many successful people. So that is evidence on its own that the charter is not a necessary condition for success. Of those who have a charter, there are a not insignificant number who are not successful. So the charter in itself is not a sufficient condition for success. So when you think about necessary and sufficient conditions, the charter is neither a necessary nor a sufficient condition for success. So in that sense, do I need it to be successful? No, you don't. If I have it, will I be successful? Not necessarily. But you have to compare that in an individual with the absence of it. Without it, could I be successful? Well, maybe you might not get into the right rooms. Maybe you might not get in front of the right people. But if you can get in the right rooms in front of the right people, well, there you go. If you can open doors on your own, well, there you go. Is there something in the process that will help me avoid career-ending mistakes? Maybe there is. And maybe that's enough. Maybe because we can't see what didn't happen, right? So to say that it didn't help me, well, how do you know it didn't help you? How do you know it didn't help you? Maybe it allowed you to avoid a catastrophic mistake that would have put you in a worse position than you are in today if you don't think you're in the place you want to be. You don't know that. We don't have a counterfactual to go against a statement like that. All we can say is, I know successful people who don't have a charter. And I know people with a charter, believe me, I know people with a charter who are not successful. So it's neither a necessary nor sufficient condition, in which case it really comes down to what else do you have? What other gravitas do you have that makes it unnecessary or less desirable? It seems every viewer is experienced on CFA. Can anyone suggest me some material on CFA? I'm starting to prepare level 1. The best place to start is the CFAinstitute.org. Get familiar with what the process is, what you have to go through, what it's all about. And then you can always go to Reddit and type in that question. I guarantee you that question has been asked and answered a whole bunch of times. I was near the average in mocks, but failed ethics and eco were way below, rest average above. Advice for August 2023. I think I've already answered that. How to prepare for level 1. Well, that's not really what we're doing here today. This is level 3, but for level 1, level 1 is may seem challenging at this point, but when you're at level 3, looking back at level 1, you'll say, "My God, that was easy. I wish level 3 were that," because it's a lot of facts. It's a lot of this is that, this is the definition of this, these are the type of bonds you can have, this is what this one does, here's the relationship of interest rates with bonds. It's a lot of declarative knowledge that no one really would disagree with very much. At level 3, you can have a debate about liability-driven investing and whether or not it's the most optimal way to build an asset portfolio for a stream of liabilities. It's not as if that's a settled question, by the way. It is a practice. It is a form of managing your assets, not followed by everybody with a liability stream. But at level 1, there's far less of that kind of thing where, I disagree with this for this reason. It's just a lot of straightforward facts. It's easier to get through in that sense, but it's big. Level 1 is big. It covers a lot. So don't underestimate the amount of time, and don't be fooled by the calendar thinking, wow, May is so far away. I got lots of time. Best approach for studying fixed income and economics for level 3. The best approach is combining a bunch of learning approaches. So, reading and doing questions is the traditional form we're all used to. It's what we did through university. You have to somehow try to turn it into a case study reading. And the only way to do that is in a discussion group. So get involved in a group. And get involved in with a group of people who know more than you. What's the point if you're the smartest person in the room? You've got nothing to learn. You want other people in the room that you're with to be smarter than you. I mean, the best room to be in when you're learning is when you're the least knowledgeable person in the room. Great, great. I mean, look at all the resources I got sitting around the table now. So try to turn it into a discussion group, form a group of like-minded people. And here's the thing. If you put out a request on Reddit for 2 or 3 people for a level 3 study group on fixed income, make it by topic, for fixed income, let's say, you're not going to attract people who are just looking to get by, because they're not going to show up to a discussion group. They're not even going to raise their hand. So the ones that raise their hand are self-selecting. So right away, something about their motivation, right? That's the beautiful thing about giving an option for people to self-select like that, is only those that will self-select in have what you're looking for. Let's see. Students who redo fixed income derivatives, behavioral finance portfolio, February. I'm unsure. One of your students who now have to redo L3, although fixed income and derivatives at 70, good. Behavioral finance, portfolio management, low. February or August. I am so unsure. Will only receive 2 weeks in February. Okay, I don't know what the 2 weeks in February means. I guess you'll only receive 2 weeks off in February. If you're on the fence on something like this, I would seem to think August is the way to go when you're on the fence. If you have indecision, it's probably because there's something about February that's just too close or just not convenient. And if that's the case, err on the side of caution and take the longer one. When there's no decision to make, when you think, well, I'm going to write it for February, well, then your decision is done. But if you're debating February or August, if you're doing that, there's some reason why February is not a slam dunk. And if that's the case, what is that law? If something can go wrong, something will go wrong. So if you think that there's some reason why February is going to be inconvenient, chances are it's going to be inconvenient. I forget the name of the law. There's some law that's Murphy's Law. Yeah, if something can go wrong, it will. Let's see. So I miss you. What's your guidance for someone who has failed level 3 thrice after clearing other levels first go? My advice is, if you're one of our subscribers, is take the August exam. May, June, and the first 2 weeks of July, we will have sessions specifically for candidates who are on at least their third attempt. Not the second, but at least their third attempt. We will have eight sessions for that. And the sessions aren't going to be teaching sessions. They're going to be discussion sessions. We're going to take a significant topic and we're going to look at it in all of its nuance so that we can understand that there are a bunch of ways at which we can look at a particular topic, that it's not so clear cut. And when we start to see the complexity in it, we will then start to recognize the simplicity in its understanding. But you first have to get to the complexity first. If you don't see the complexity in something, you're missing something. At level 3, there's always some complexity where it seems like, well, it could be this, it could be that. And then as you start thinking about it, you go, it all falls into place. And it's saying it's only this if it's this. And it's only this if it's that. It's not like it could be all these things. It depends on the context. But you must see the complexity first before the simplicity arises. Let's see. I used pass first time, write as mocks over and over. The morning exam is very hard. So let me say something about that. I do write the structured response questions difficult, far more difficult than you're going to get on the exam. But I don't step outside of the learning objective. I don't make stuff up. I don't look in deep corners of the reading and pick on something that you'd never see. They're all big topics. They're all things that you would expect to see that flow right from a learning objective. But I'm not going to make it so simple just to make you feel good. What's the point? What's the point of doing a mock exam and walking away from it knowing nothing more than when you started? It doesn't seem to make sense to me. That it should break you. It should hurt you. It should be hard, because when you reach for those things, by the time you get to the easier fight is easy, because you've been through some questions that pushed you a little further than you had to go, where you saw connections that weren't so obvious the first time. Well, now you're not going to be messed up by that kind of stuff. So they are hard on purpose, because the success of the exam, the exams we have, is not so much that you get a good score, but that when you're done with it, and when you're done with the live session that we do, when you leave that live session, you know more than when you started. There's the success right there. If you don't, well, then it was a waste of your time all the way around. But you should be walking away from each of these sessions feeling deflated, but knowing a lot more than when you started. Boom. Now you know it, right? Boxers, when they train for a fight, whatever weight class they're in, they'll train in the ring with somebody in the next weight class or the next weight class up. Because when you have somebody 20 pounds heavier than you leaning on the ropes, leaning you back, pushing you into the corner and leaning on you, and you have to keep pushing that person off, you won't believe how tired your shoulders get. And then you're going to start dropping your hands and it's over for you. You do that so that when you get into the ring with somebody your own size, it's easy. It's easy because you overtrained with the heavier guy. This is the same thing. I'm going to overtrain you so that when you get in the ring with the guy that's your size, it'd be just fine. When should I use QBank? After you feel that you have gone through the discovery phase. So remember what I said about learning. You have a discovery phase and you have a reinforcement phase. The reinforcement phase is the QBank. That's when you should use the QBanks. Focusing on watching lecture videos in EOSQ, but haven't used the QBank, thing I can do during QBank during my review month. I'd be putting it in sooner than the review month. Your review month is where you really want to be on the mock exams. Do you have a learning sequence for level 3? I do. When you, and this is free for everybody as well. You can open up a free account on our site, and on the left menu, there is a planner. Click on the planner and select your level, and there's already a recommended sequence of topics that you can go through. First time level 3 here. I'll be writing in the August 2023 window. I was wondering if it is possible to pay for classes now. Yes, you can. You can register. You can subscribe on our site for August of 2023 anytime. Anytime. What's your guidance for someone who has failed level 3? Okay, already answered that. Where are we here? I'm going to start from the bottom, work my way back up. Okay, questions are going by fast. Is it worth ask CFA for revision if you got really close to MPS? Okay, so I have answered this question lots of times, and my answer is always the same. No, it's not worth it. Retabulation doesn't regrade your exam. Retabulation just adds up the scores you got to make sure they were added correctly. However, I did have a conversation with somebody on, I think it was a Zoom meeting, that wanted to do a retabulation, and I was negative on that, saying, I just don't see the value in it. And then he showed me the results. And when I saw the results, it was the one time where I thought, okay, here it kind of makes sense. So he had scores that were above 70 and between 50 and 70, and only one section all the way down at 0. How can that be? How can you get 0? How can that be? That it does seem like that would be the footprint of a missing score, that something was missed in adding up your score. That one looks like it was missed, because how could you be consistently here and suddenly this one way down at 0 and you're just a smidgen under the minimum passing score? At that point, I would say this looks like a missed score. But if it were just like higher up, like 30%, I'd say it doesn't, they're not going to regrade it. They're just going to recount it, and it looks like it was counted. This one looked clearly like it wasn't counted. So if there was a footprint of an error, that's what it would look like. It wouldn't look like, oh, I have low scores, it can't be right. They're just going to re-add up the scores. They won't regrade the questions. So I find that retabulation isn't a thing. I sat 4 times. I knew the stuff. I knew the answers. Not able to cross the line. I am doing, and it just flew off the screen. I had the question here. It flew off the screen. I'm doing PhD in something. Well, I just lost the question. The comment section comes very fast here. Oh, there, I'm doing PhD in finance. Okay, so here's the thing about the difference between a PhD in finance and what's going on here. And I find that this is a very common disconnect. And it's not just in finance, it's in other disciplines in business schools as well. A PhD is a research degree that is heavily focused more on the philosophy of knowledge than it is on application in the real world. A PhD is not a more powerful MBA. If you're looking for a professional degree, it ends at the MBA. The PhD is purely a research degree, an academic degree. It takes no time in teaching you how the real world works. It takes all the time in teaching you what knowledge is and what the structure of knowledge is. And once you get that, then it's up to you to discover how the real world works beyond operational issues. So then you spend your time with things like, does this variable affect this variable? And if so, under what conditions would it affect this variable? Well, that's discovering new knowledge. Well, to do that, you first of all have to have a definition of, well, what is knowledge? What ontological assumptions do we have, and As far as the methods of discovering it, that's more epistemology. So you spend a lot of time on the structure of knowledge and understanding what knowledge is. And then you go and you discover knowledge. That's very different than being in markets. You can take some of the best published PhDs out there in finance and throw them in a trading pit and they'd be lost, because that's really not what a PhD is about at all. But if you take a PhD and you cross it with somebody who's been in markets for years, there's the power of it. Because the PhD, it's like an engineering degree. If anyone's ever been through engineering, there's no better way to develop systematic thinking than through an approach like that. So I would say that a PhD trained individual, because they understand the structure of knowledge and the systematic way to think, if they then start learning the operations of a market, they can be very, very powerful in that respect. But if you're not getting the applied part of it, it's not like saying, hey, look, I'm doing a PhD in finance and I'm not getting this. It's kind of like saying, look, I've been in dental school for 4 years and I can't figure out how to operate on my dog. Yeah, they're two, just because it's a PhD in finance, it's not the same thing. So don't beat yourself up for that. It's the PhD program is not concerned with how the real world, of how you would interact with the real world. It's concerned about finding truth and knowledge, which on its own, I think, is a noble pursuit. Okay, I think we're done here. Eh? Please share book sources that can help people who don't want to pursue CFA but want to learn investing. I love analysis. It comes natural, be it poker. Okay, that I've been asked that a lot. Here's the deal with those kind of things is you do have, I got a bookshelf here and I've got a bunch of books on there. Some of them good, some of them, I've not come across one that is effective in positioning your thinking in a certain way, or giving you a technique or a strategy or a skill. Because if something is working, if I have found some structural inefficiency, I'm not sharing it with you. I'm not sharing it with you until I'm done with it. And when it no longer works, I will write a book and then you will be the final trade. So most of these books, unless they're a history of something, you know, this is what happened in the 90s. This is what happened in long-term capital management. This is my experience in this particular industry at this time. Unless it's just something like that, where you're just trying to gain some, you know, kind of story about what happened at some point in time. As far as being forward-facing, that is not anything that you can write in a book. It's a constellation of knowledge and experience. And experience you can get in two ways. You can import your experience by being beside another experienced person and absorbing off of them, or you put in the time and you get experience. You learn from your mistakes and you keep moving forward. So there are no good books on that particular front. However, to get closer to the market, every Sunday I put out a market update on my YouTube channel. You can watch that, and that may give you ideas about how to think about how to structure your thinking to think about the market. And then, of course, there's the applied series that I have, which you know, goes into a lot more detail about how would you use a particular strategy if we came across a security and we looked at it. What possible strategies could we have for this security, such that if I were only given one stock that I could trade and that was my entire universe, how can I make money off that? Even if the price isn't going up, what can I do to make money off that one thing if that's the only one thing that I have? Let's see. I'm just hitting questions at random now here. Would you suggest students who want to do CFA prep along with your applied series should manage their time between the two? I don't think you have to do that. I think your priority is the CFA prep. The applied series won't expire. In trying to figure out what the appropriate structure for that is, I thought, well, it'll expire at the end of a certain year, and then I thought it doesn't make sense for it to expire, like, because your career doesn't. Why should this? And the markets are always ever changing, so it's secondary. It doesn't require the same effort that CFA does. However, I will say this: in watching it, it will reinforce what you see in level one. It'll make level one not clearer, but it will put it more into context so that it won't seem so daunting, that when you get to level two and you get deeper into certain parts of the market, like when you get deeper into economics and you get deeper into derivatives, it'll won't be so new. It won't be so like uncharted territory. What else we have? He cleared one of the first. I failed L3 twice, this time with blue range touching MPC. No career benefits, but pursued for personal growth. Still wishing, but poor. Whoa. Okay. Yeah. Well, I don't know if that's a question or a statement. Retaker, 1 or 2%. Start with all your Q banks without memory. Scored 70 to 80. Where should I go now? Lectures, CFA Qs, memorizing slides. Well, if you're a level 3 retaker, no memorizing slides. No, don't. I don't think that's a valid use of your time, or a valuable use of your time, given that you could do something else. I would be looking either for somebody to have in a study group that you could have regular meetings with, maybe once a week for an hour and a half, where this week we're going to talk about this reading, or next week we're going to talk about that reading. You have an agenda for what you're going to talk about, because that's the only way to stay on course, or to begin answering other people's questions, and becoming a teacher to other people as best you can, because you will never learn more than when you teach somebody else, because it uncovers all of the holes that you have in your knowledge. If you can't explain it simply to someone else, as Einstein said, if you can't explain it simply, it means you don't understand it yourself. Let's see. Is it worth memorizing reading headings and LOSs for a few days? Nope. I would not spend any time memorizing headlines and LOSs at all. Nope. Okay. Every time I try to go for a question, the thing scrolls. Is it necessary to study the ethics? Necessary to study the ethics handbook? Well, yes. Yes, it's a significant weighting on each exam, 1, 2, and 3, 15%. So overall, out of the 300%, it makes up 45% of the 300%, assuming, level 1, 2, and 3. It's a silo that you see at each level. Okay, let's go back to the bottom and work our way up again. How to use the fact that we passed L3 to get a job in core finance? So this is a good question, because I find that universities fail on this quite considerably. Most universities fail on this. CFA itself doesn't do much to promote your social capital, but there are lots of CFA societies. You should be a member of one of the CFA societies, because there's a whole bunch of people who are in the industry in the CFA society. You've spent some time building your human capital. Now you have to build your social capital. And your social capital consists of who you know, number one. More importantly, who knows you, and do they like you? So Yeah, that's the one thing I think that too many people who are um, accreditationally uh, uh, um, biased towards tend to forget is that I know all of this stuff, but I don't know any of these people and none of them know me. So, how do I convey to them that I know this stuff that they value? Well, you have to get yourself out there somehow. You have to build some kind of audience. You have to, build your social capital. Let's see. Would you recommend to use the CFAI books or some other external provider? CFAI books only, and I'll tell you why. CFAI is very, very clear with this, to the point where I don't know why anybody would use another type of book. They are extremely clear with this. The exams are based off the things that are written in their books and their books only. Period. They're not based off anybody else's books. They're based purely on what's written in their books. They have been rewriting the readings. They've done this at level 1 to some degree. They're going to do more of it at level 1 going forward, away from the reading to the module approach. So a reading might have been 40 pages. Well, they've broken it down now into modules, and each module is 1 or 2 learning objectives. And it's very contained. And here's the thing that I've noticed about the module approach. If you do a word count on the reading versus a word count on all the modules, when I say a word count, you're ignoring all of the examples, just a word count. Far fewer words. However, far more examples. So it's a lot more learning by example than learning by narrative. Which I think is superior for that move. So it's a good move forward in that respect. That the structure is a lot better. There are fewer words to read and more examples of this is how it's done, so that you can, rather than reading an abstract paragraph of this is that and related to this, you actually see it a couple of times, and that I think is a great part of the learning process. So the readings themselves have minimized the amount of words that they are using and maximize the examples. I don't know that you're going to get that from an external book, because while the words are easy to do, it's the examples and the setup of the examples that require quite a lot of effort and time to get done. That being that you now pay, you get access to the learning ecosystem, and in the learning ecosystem you have all the readings. Why you would put out money for readings that are going to end up being less than what you have doesn't make any sense to me. If you are reading the fixed income at level 3 and immunization, you say, I don't like these 2 readings, they're just not enough. Then get another, go on Amazon, type in Google, type in, best textbook for immunization, and you'll get a list of the best textbooks, because you're not the first person to ask that question. And buy those books. I've got 3, 4 on my shelf, and I probably got another 3 in my in either bookshelf or Kindle. Because books only cost me 47 cents on the dollar. What costs you $100 only costs me $47, because I have a 53% tax bracket. So when I buy a book, it's a business expense. So books to me are super cheap now. So I'll get somebody's textbook just to see how they presented something, which might inform the way that I would do a video. I would say that if you have trouble in a particular reading, go to a better source for that topic, not a different set of books for the whole level. I see no purpose in deviating from the CFA readings in terms of finding an alternative to the CFA readings, as opposed to finding a topic and going deeper into the book on which that reading was based, if that helps you there. What do you think about spaced repetition? Yeah, exactly. That's part of a learning technique. It gives your mind time to assimilate information. Oftentimes you'll see, this is my schedule. I'm going to do this, 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 this. The next day I'm going to do this, 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 and this. And you look at the schedule and say, okay, well, you're doing this, you're going to work, you're doing this, you've left. I don't see any place on your schedule for time to think. Where's that? Where's all the time to think and to let your mind work on these things? You've got a nice busy schedule with all the hours put in, but the most important part is, when do you think? Time off thinking for your brain is like sleeping for your body. It's something you need to make yourself stronger the next day. The longer you go without sleep, the less effective you perform. The longer you study without having a break in between or without spacing things out, the less effective you become with each minute. You're effective for about 45 minutes, and then that starts to fall off very quickly. Now, that's different for every person. Some people are effective maybe up to about 2.5 hours, and it starts falling off very quickly after that. Once you start getting that feeling like, okay, like it's just, you just can't read another word because you're getting sick of it. Once you get there, stop. You're spinning your wheels. Every minute after that is low productivity. You're probably using 10 seconds of every minute after that, as opposed to using 60 seconds. Just stop, walk away. So it's not the time you put in, it's the consistency at which you work your process, but always put big gaps in there, which is, going back to what I said earlier. Do your first pass, your very light pass. Yeah, you're going to walk away with, I don't get this and I don't get that and I don't understand this. But when you come back to it, some of those things will have settled out. And when you go through the second pass, check, you'll be checking them off in your mind as you get to them, because you'll have questions in your head. Okay, what's this one here? We recommend CFA books. I already answered that. I've stopped studying for level 1. What's the best way to get back into it? Yeah, sometimes you could lose momentum, right? You start with something and then you sort of drift away from it, and then you find it hard to get back into it. The best way is to, rather than see it as a big mountain, see it as one thing you want to get done. So your goal today is nothing more than pick one LOS, the first LOS, and say, that's all I'm doing. I'm only going to know this LOS and I'm done. Well, that's victory. The next day you say, okay, well, you'll be a little bit more motivated because you have a victory. I'll do 2 LOSs. Well, maybe that might be 7 pages. You go through that. You say, okay, there's 3 LOSs of this reading done, and you slowly build momentum. I think the best way to clean your house is not to take a whole day off and clean your house, but every day take 20 minutes and clean and do something 20 minutes a day. At the end of the week, you've cleaned your house and you haven't even noticed it. And once you clean one little section of your house, you'll find that it's addicting. You'll say, well, let me get that counter too while I'm at it. And well, I may as well do this while I'm at it. So rather than seeing it as this big monolithic task that, I got 5 hours of work in front of me, you say, I'm just going to do one little thing. And from that one thing, you say, I can do this. And then when you get there, you say, well, I can do this. And it becomes its own momentum, because you've not seen it as this big monolithic task that you have to do. I use, look at that. I got, last year, I think it's the same guy. I recognize him. Stung me twice on this arm over here. So I've learned now that they're not really trying to sting you. They're just kind of hanging out there. But if you threaten it, then they want to sting you. And I don't want to kill the guy, but I don't want him walking on me anymore. So let's see if I can't convince him that the desk is a better place for him to be. Humanitarian, already saving the world. We have a shortage of bees anyway, so let him fly around. But if he stings me, I'm going to bring the war to his home. What do we got here? Can we see your bookshelf? I don't know. Kind of, it's right there. How can I do it? It looks, it's got shelves and it's got books on it. So just kind of close your eyes and imagine like a wall unit with shelves with books on it, and it looks just like that. Score 25 and out every many times. I'm your subscriber. Appreciate all. Okay, need your advice. Failed level 2 times. Hairline below the NBS. Okay, so when I normally if this were a class, I'd say show of hands, but you can answer this yourself. Are you connected to the market at all? Are there companies that you follow? Do you read their annual and their quarterly report? Do you listen to their conference call? Are you in the game to some degree or another? Many of the candidates that I've spoken to, when I ask that question, the answer is no. And so I wonder, what are you doing? Like, this is the game you want to play. Why are you not playing the game? You can do it now. If you start doing that kind of thing, the stuff that you're reading right now and learning clears up because you begin to see it out there. You begin to connect it and you say, I understand what they're saying here. And it makes this a lot clearer that I would seem to think you'd want to play in that world. You don't have to play with real money, but you should be able to carry on a conversation about the current state of the market. You should be able to talk about the current state of monetary policy. You should be able to have a conversation about, growth rates across different countries. And then you begin to tie that to level 2 economics. And you realize that, given the growth rates in the United States over the last little while, it appears that we're in the steady state. That's that curve that you get when you add capital to labor. Your capital labor ratio increases, your output increases, but it has diminishing returns. All of a sudden that starts to make sense because you can see it in the developed economies. Read reports. Just go to Google, type it in. There's plenty of reports that are issued out there that are available that you can read. Economic summaries, different things. But you should be curious all the time. You should be intellectually curious rather than saying, oh, Apple had good earnings. Why? Why do they have good earnings? Get their quarterly report out. Start reading. Break it down. What have you learned? See if you can apply it. Calculate their operating margins. Go to their segment performance. Calculate the operating margins by segment. Calculate the growth rates by segment for fun. You're applying something that you've already learned, and it's making you better because if you're sitting in a job interview one day and a topic comes up, you've already done your homework on those things. But you got to get into the game. So that would be my advice is try not to make it so abstract and academic. Try to make it as real as you can by putting one foot in the game. This is focused on L3, but can you explain what differs in ethics L1, L2? Nothing. I'm finalizing review for L2 November 22. Thanks and greetings from Mexico. Nothing really changes. Level 1 is I think got questions more about I wouldn't say the higher level part of ethics, but if I had to, focus questions differently, at least based on the end of chapter questions I've seen in CFAI, I feel that 2 is a bit more centered around the substandard. So you have standard 1 all the way through standard 7, then you have standard 1 to standard 1 ABCD. I call them ABCD, but it's 1, 2, 3, 4. That level 2 tends to get more into those and less about 1 through 7, whereas the questions on level 1 were more about 1 through 7 with a little dipping into the substandards, whereas level 2 dipped into it more. But the end of chapter questions for level 1 are the same as the end of chapter questions for level 3. But level 3 has these case studies, which level 1, does level 1 have them now? Because I did a whole bunch of case studies, but I didn't assign them anywhere. I don't know that there's, I think if you learn ethics for level 1 and I gave you level 2 questions, you probably wouldn't know the difference. In fact, I know you don't know the difference, because in our Q bank, our questions for ethics are the same at all three levels. So you probably aren't recognizing the difference because they're the same. I don't know that there's much of a difference. I'm watching this wasp over here. It's getting closer and closer to me. Maybe he sees that I'm friends with the chipmunk and he wants to be friends with me in this respect, thinking I'll give him food. But I mean, I got honey, but they don't eat honey. They make honey, so I don't know what to give them. Or her. Let's be fair. It could be a her. Actually, are there female bees, or is it only the queen that's female? They're all male, right? I think they're all male and there's only one female. Imagine that kind of world. Let's see. Sod's Law mentor said he would urge me not to repeat in August mental decay. I'm scared of February because of my qualitative nature. I would like to go through all your videos again. I don't know how to read that question. Hey, you can't assume that. Yeah, somebody already got that. Or they, it could be a they. A they be. A they be? A bee? Get it? A they be? I don't know. It's, it looks drunk. Walking all over the place like that. Let's see. I've completed L1 7 years ago and being busy with life and work. Now I'm planning to prepare for L2. Any advice? Learning is like riding a bike. You may go 5-6 years without riding a bike, but when you get on it, you pick it. Like you don't forget it. Learning is the same way. There may be some stuff that you read where you say, "Well, I haven't seen this information before." So you might, if you're going for level 2 on our site, you can always add a level 1 archive, and then you could just review the readings at level 1 that support level 2. You can do that and sort of get up to speed on that. Okay, I've already answered that. I'm thinking about building some equity research reports. Any advice to begin? Don't begin with complexity. Begin with simplicity. Begin with simplicity and then add complexity after. So if you're doing a forecast for revenue, think about, how revenue is going to grow over the next period of time and model it simply. You may come back at some point and you say, well, I don't know if it's going to grow at that rate. I think I'm going to model it in relation to growth in real GDP. I have a forecast for real GDP, and I think it has a relationship with real GDP that its growth rate will be 150 basis points higher, or will be related to the 10-year yield or something. But then you begin to add complexity to it. Don't try to solve all of that in your first model that you build. Build a simple model, and then every time you look at a line item, try to add a little bit more complexity to each of those line items. So when you sit on a conference call for a company, the analysts get on and they ask information. All of those questions that they're asking are designed to help them build that incremental little bit more complexity in their model. Can you give us some more color on how you think this cost will unfold past this date? You said that you'll have these charges and those charges, but what do you see as a rate going after? Because they're looking for something in their model to help them build their model. You're not going to start with that model. There's just no way. But you can get there. Some models take years to build. That you'll start with a simple process, and 4 years later, you'll look at your spreadsheet and your model and you go, I can't believe what my first one looked like. And there's so much value in your spreadsheet at that point. And companies realize this as well, that all those spreadsheet models become the property of the company you work for, because it represents so many hours of work, of intellectual property in that spreadsheet, in that model, that you don't want to have to start from scratch every time you bring someone in. So have a spreadsheet, build a model, document your assumptions, and then add complexity each time. But if you try to model it with complexity on your first attempt, you're going to produce nothing much. Build a naive model. and then slowly bring it closer into resemblance with what you think the company is doing or where you think the company is going. Okay, it's gone. I don't know where it is at this point. I'm hoping it's nowhere on me that can hurt me, because those bee stings are a son of a bitch, I'll tell you. If you ever been stung by a bee, it's this hot feeling you get. You get a little circle, and it's just this hot, it's like this sharp, I don't know how to explain it. It's just like, there it is. I got it. It's on my leg. Okay, it's safe down there. Let's see. Can we learn L3? No. There's an understanding, and it's more about evaluating the context that you're in. No, I don't think you can learn your way through level 3 at all. Think about, okay, we are 2+, so I thought we would see some noise of kids moving around, but quiet place. No kids. I dodged that bullet my whole life. No, never got married. No kids, no ex-wives, which is why financially I'm doing okay, because I've never had to give away half my stuff. I've never had to pay out $500,000 to raise a kid till they're 18, and I have no alimony or support payments to make. It's all mine. You know that a kid to the time they're 18 is the equivalent of a nice mid-level Lamborghini. So if you have 2 kids, you've given up 2 Lamborghinis in your life, or a really nice 36-foot boat and a Lamborghini. Gone. But maybe you're getting some value out of them because you have an in-house IT support staff now. I'm lacking that. So no, you're going to see nothing running around back here. Okay, I think I've answered a whole bunch of the questions. I think we're good on this one. If you have any other specific questions that I didn't answer, you can always send something through Contact Us and answer that. Let's see. If I purchase the package for your site for 2023, but right in 2024, when a new curriculum comes out, we'll receive the updated package. If you buy one for 2023 and you don't register for any exam, that's as far as it goes. We have a 1 fee to pass, but it requires one of 2 conditions. Number 1, that you wrote the exam and didn't pass, or number 2, you were registered for the exam, but you just didn't go. It never used to cover that, but in 2023, it's going to start. The 2023 packages now cover I was registered, but I didn't go. What it doesn't cover is I'm just going to buy it, but never register and never write, and always renew and renew. It doesn't cover that. We have a very specific pricing schedule that we follow, and our pricing is based on cost plus. So there are 2 broad ways in which we can price something. We can price it on value-based pricing. In other words, we can estimate the value you get out of it and charge you for the value you get out of it. There we would get to prices like $1,500 or $2,000 for a level, which I find is great for me, but not so great for you, because it's going to right away eliminate many of you from having access to education. And it doesn't give you more value than what you paid for. I'm extracting probably at $1,500. Anybody who's charging $1,500, I think at this point, given technology that we have that can allow for better form business models, anyone who's charging $1,500 is probably extracting a lot more value than they're creating. So we have a very accessible price point, which is a cost plus pricing. And when you're cost plus, you have to have an eye on your costs all the time. That just to carry someone who's not going to write the exam, who's just taking it, and to carry them year after year after year would only raise costs for the candidates who are actually going to write an exam. So we have a policy that says, listen, in order to keep our costs low, we simply can't have tourists in that sense. It's also one of the reasons we don't advertise, because if we advertised, we would then have to charge you to recover the money that we spent to get you. Those are called customer acquisition costs, or CACs. And in this kind of industry, CACs usually run around 200 to 250 per candidate. So if we did advertise, our starting price just to break even from advertising would be 200 to 250 bucks. Listen, the Japanese taught us something very powerful in the 1980s. Quality is free. That if you make a great quality car, you can increase the margins on every car because you don't have to fix it later. Quality is free. That if you make something of very high quality, you lower your costs. You don't actually raise your costs, you lower your costs. So that's sort of the philosophy we followed, is let's just do really great education. We won't advertise. If we do really great education, we'll get word of mouth. If we get word of mouth, we'll grow. If we don't get word of mouth, we have no reason for existence. So why try to persuade you to give us money of which no one is talking about the thing that we're doing? Do you see the circular flow and all of that? So when I see a company that's advertising aggressively, I think you have no word of mouth. Otherwise, your word of mouth would carry the day for you, which means you have to persuade. And if you have to persuade, I'm skeptical. Let's see. Children are money-sucking pits. Yeah, but they're a source of love, right? And if you play it right, they could also be your retirement plan. Let's see. What's the schedule for live sessions for L3 February? 6 weeks before the exam, where there's the AM sessions and office hours. Office hours are... So there's a couple of sections that usually are very challenging: economics, currencies, derivatives, fixed income, where I hold an open session and I answer all your questions. And the session can be an hour or it could be 3 hours. I keep going until all the questions are answered. For those of you who have been to them before, it's all you see is a black screen, and I draw on the screen and I draw out the answers so that you can have a visual of the relationships between things. Because I think we can see things better when we see a picture as opposed to a list of facts, right? So that'll start mid-January, I imagine. Yeah, mid-January, 6 weeks before the 7 weeks before the exam schedule starts. So mid-January to get you ready for the February 2023. Yeah. Let's see. Where can I start fintech? Algo investing is what I mean. What programming language and resources to learn? For that, there's lots of good Google resources for fintech. There's lots of good YouTube stuff for fintech as well. I think the main language is Python. I think the main language there is Python, which is apparently not very difficult to learn. CFA versus CMT. CFA first. CMT, I'd say 50% of CMT is probably worth it. The other 50% is just one big giant eye roll. Like, it's like, oh my God, like, come on, but some people really believe that stuff, right? Okay, let's see. Where can I start? Okay. Do you think the blue box examples from CFA Institute, CFI Institute material are a must? Okay. CFI is a Canadian company. That's the Corporate Finance Institute. I think you mean CFA Institute. Do you think the blue box examples from CFA are a must? I do. I'm reinforcing my knowledge by doing all the Q-Bank questions for each reading. I would focus on, not focus, but I would definitely include them. Most definitely. Tactical bottoms can be called scalp. Oh, some people are day trading in the chat. But CAC can increase long-term MRR. Well, true. Customer acquisition costs can increase it, but you have to ask yourself what it is that you're doing. We recently sold to a private equity firm that's building a larger company. that was never the goal. We just got to the size where it became unmanageable unless we increased our staff significantly, but we couldn't find staff. And I had some good people working for me that without giving them some upward mobility somewhere, I risked losing, which is why we sold. But we didn't start with the idea of saying, oh, let's build it up and sell. If we did, if that was our goal, yeah, we would have had very big customer acquisition costs, because our goal would have been to drive revenues as high as we possibly can in the early days, and then rationalize in the last 2 years before the sale to maximize EBITDA. But we never did that. We never had a losing day in our history, because we didn't operate the business in that particular way. So yes, customer acquisition costs can accelerate your growth very early. But word of mouth, without word of mouth, you are sentenced to a life of advertising, of always advertising to get the next group of students. Because for the type of business we have, you're not lifetime customers. You are at best a 3-time customer. At best, a 3-time customer. So spending advertising dollars, if we had to spend advertising dollars, it means that we have to, okay, that was a little close. That means that we have to keep spending money to keep bringing in new people. Well, where is all of the people who have taken our course? Why are they not helping us out? Why are they not talking? Where's the word of mouth? If you have that, you don't have to spend money on customer acquisition costs. And so we sort of got there. If our goal initially was to say, let's ramp up sales, let's ramp up top line revenues, and let's sell ourselves to a bigger player, then yeah, you have a very different strategy, because profitability is secondary at that point. Your metrics are not, here are our margins, here's our profit, here's our growth in whatever. Your metrics are growth in customers. That's all you care about, is growth in customers. Customers at any cost. Well, that's Groupon, right? That's what Groupon did, customers at any cost, and that did not work out well for them. They didn't pay enough attention to the value proposition they were creating with their customer, such that their customer became an evangelist for them, and they lost that momentum. Okay, I missed a question here. Yeah, these go by so fast. I missed the question. Let me go to the end, and I'll start working my way up. Would Serify not push your prices up? No. Serify is not a. How can I explain how they are? They have a certain creed by which they, when they acquire companies, they have a certain creed: do no harm. They buy successful businesses, and they trust that business was successful because of the way you did things. So we're not going to change the way you do things. What it allows us to do is access a much larger IT team than we had. It allows us to access a much larger HR department than what we had, and it gives employees upward mobility. But their first rule is do no harm. So they have some ideas of what they would like to see, and I have ideas of what I would like to be. And when those two things align, that's what we do. Now, are prices going to go up in the future? Yeah, they're going to have to. Here's the one thing we know: Amazon has had a bad time with their stock price. You think they're not going to raise prices on AWS? We know going into our renewal, which is May, we know they're gonna hit us with a price increase for no other reason than their stock price is down, and they're gonna have to boost earnings, and they're gonna get it from me and people like me. We know the cost is going up, but we also have a rule about our price increases is that we are free. I'm not against price increases. If we want to increase the price, if everyone comes to me and says, let's increase our price $50, I say, okay, how much value are you adding? If it's just a $50 price increase just to say we're charging $50 more, my answer is no. No, you can't do that. You must show me where the other $50 is for the customer. If they're going to pay $50 more, how much more value are we going to add? So we know that we have probably a price increase coming only because of just the sheer amount of cost increases we're seeing almost everywhere we turn now. There's a price increase. I have Apple, just as an example, I have Apple TV. It was $6 a month. At $6 a month, I thought, that's not too bad. It's now $9 a month. I got the notice that my last payment of $6 was the last payment of $6. It's now $9. Okay, so $9. But that's a 50% price increase. They have to support their stock prices, right? So we know we're going to get price increases from all our suppliers. So we're going to have to increase price. So we have to increase value. And the one thing that we're going to do to increase value, and this is the test at level 3, is for multiple people who have multiple failures from wherever you got them. They don't have to be ours. You don't have to be ours. You could have been with Kaplan twice and you failed twice, or with another provider. I don't want to single out any name. It could be anybody. But then you come to us and you say, well, it's my third attempt. We will have that extra layer. There is no charge for that extra layer this year because it's our test. And if that works out, then when we do raise our price, we then have that extra thing. We say, okay, here's the new value that we're adding now because we have to raise our price. So we can raise our price, but it's sort of the GE model. GE had this model for the longest time that said to all its businesses, you must raise your prices 10% a year. And sometimes they were in industries where we can't raise our price 10%. We're in a commoditized industry. And GE's management's answer was, find a way. That means you must decommoditize your product, or you must add value, but you have to find a way to increase your price. The moment you can't is the moment we sell that industry. And that's when they knew that they were done with an industry, because this is as good as it's going to get. It's time to sell. Well, we have the same idea. You want to raise the price, you got to raise the value. You got to add something more that has value for the candidate other than throwing more stuff at them. So to say, well, let's write up this, or we'll do these study notes, or this or that. Well, that's just yet more stuff that they have to read. That's not adding value. That's drowning them. You have to add value in the process, not in the stuff you throw at them. Probably a little bit more answer than you wanted. Any particular newsletter you subscribe to? Well, that's a good one. Not really. I don't really subscribe to any particular newsletters in that respect. I have access to a bunch of research reports. Probably the best research reports out there are the quarterly statements that companies put out, and their conference calls, their earnings calls. They're kind of neat to listen to. So, if I want to kill a couple hours on a Saturday, it's like, well, what did Apple say? What did Google say? What did Lennar say? What did Pulte Homes say? What did Freeport say? What did BHP say? What are these companies saying? And listening to them it's interesting. It's like a mini documentary on the company itself. So, there's there's a never ending stream of stuff that you can refer to. But reading newsletters would suggest that the person that I'm reading has enough credibility that they have my trust. Very few have that. Ed Yardini. Ed Yardini is probably a big one there that I'm interested in what he has to say. And if you are curious about Ed Yardini, Google him and look at his background. Talk about pedigree. Have you ever day traded before? Yeah, I have. I don't set out to day trade, but sometimes you can't help yourself. You're looking at the screen, you're going, oh, come on. I got to take that. I got to take that. Like, so I don't start the morning by saying, okay, I got to do it. I start every day with the same strategy I have. And when I see something behaving funny, I think, come on, if you're going to do that, I'm going to take the money, right? Let's see. How much do you weight human behavior and biases in successful investing? Emotion, I think, is extremely powerful. Emotional traders are bad poker players. In the market, they just lose. You have to be emotionless, and it's hard to be emotionless about your money. But you do have to look at it not as a source of frustration, but a source of interest. That when something's moving against you, getting angry doesn't do anything about that. What you have to do is say, well, that's interesting. It's a chess game now. Well, what's going on? I see your move against my move. What do I do now? And you have to be prepared. Like, I don't know that I take a trade without knowing what my next step is. Much like any chess player says, well, I'm going to move over here. I can see what your strategy is here. If you do this, I'm doing this. If you do that, I'm doing this. They know exactly what their next move is going to be when you move. And if you move into their trap, good. If you don't, okay, well, then have I set myself up for my next trade? So I don't get emotional at all. I don't get angry. I don't, if you were watching me during the day, you couldn't tell if I was up 100,000 or down 100,000. It would be, you just wouldn't be able to tell. I just find things interesting, and I know exactly what part of the distribution I'm interested in. I know where my break-even points are. I know where my stress points are. If something's working against me, I think, well, okay, what do I do now other than just stop? I don't like doing that. Buy, sell, buy, sell, buy, sell. I find that is, you're up, you're down, you're up, you're down, you're up, you're down, you're up, you're down. I don't really like that kind of trading. So it's I guess the easiest way to say it is I don't make a trade unless I know what my next 3 to 4 moves are. And then I let the market tell me what my next trade is. So I'll do an initial trade and then I wait. And then I let the market tell me what's next. So last week, the market sold off on the Fed announcement and the VIX dropped. The next day, the market sold off hard and the VIX barely budged. So at that point, you look at something like that and you say, you have a short position on the market, or your net short, and the VIX is not really responding. You know what your next move is based on that. So going into the close, you add some long delta. You pick up long delta almost anywhere. And sure enough, Friday we had a big rally. A VIX dropping tells me no one's buying puts, or very few people are buying puts for November and December. There's no fear into the end of the year. Okay, I'll go with that. So it's just a constellation of a bunch of things that when you get all of that, it helps push emotion out the door, because there's no reason to be emotional anymore, because you know exactly what you're going to do. It's sort of a Zen position to be in, like it just doesn't affect you. And the more knowledgeable you become, the less likely you are to fall victim to those cognitive biases, those information processing biases. Let's see. Any particular news? Seeking alpha is good. Okay. Let's go to the bottom of the questions. What's your morning routine like when analyzing the market? 6:30, 7 o'clock up, Bloomberg morning show on, trading app open, newsfeed overnight. So I look at the global newsfeed, which gives me everything that I need to know, and I can filter it by just economic data. I get a feel for what happened overnight. I listen to what's going on in the morning. I listen to the tone of the conversation, whether it's meandering. If it's meandering conversation, nothing interesting is going on. If it's about a particular topic, it'll be beaten to death. Then you'll know that it's something to pay attention to. Then I go to portfolio news, which is all the news related to the positions that I just happen to have. And I look at the headlines, anything I don't know. So there'll be a headline on something. I'll go, already knew that. And if I already knew it, there's no point in me reading it again. And then it's the open. I rarely trade the open, but the open is important to watch. By 10:30, I'm done. And then I get on with the rest of my day. Around 2:00, I'll log back in, see what's going on. And then usually 3:20 to 4:00, I'm back on the system because I need to see the close. But during the middle of the day, 10:30 to 2:30, is really not a lot going on. It's wasted time, really. But that's my day. Let's see. Given the Bloomberg terminal very high prices, are there any other cheaper subscriptions to read analyst notes, market commentary from the large sell side? Well, anything you're going to get is from the sell side. The buy side is not going to tell the world what it wants to do. So it's the sell side that you're reading research on. If you have Interactive Brokers, they have quite a bit for you there as well. Bloomberg is expensive and it's overkill. Unless you're a big fixed income trader, it's almost a necessity for fixed income. For equity, not really. I never found it to be that useful. That almost anything you could get on Bloomberg, you can get somewhere else. Bloomberg Intelligence, probably had some kind of neat stuff in there, but for the price you pay for everything else, I didn't find it worth it. I use Koyfin, which it's Koyfin, which is fairly inexpensive, like $30 a month. And it gives me a lot greater charting capability than Interactive Brokers does. Plus, it gives me a bunch of information. Their data is from IQ Partners, so you can have a certain trust in that data because it's the same that comes from S&P Global. So I use that. If you're on the Sunday morning, if you watch the Sunday update, the very first link in the description box for every update is a link to Koyfin. If you click on it, it will give you a 10% discount off their price if you decide that that's what you want. Okay, what else do we have? Unrelated question. Is Interactive Brokers good enough for trading and investing in most asset classes? Absolutely. Yes, it is. Every market, every asset class in the world, other than private assets, but every market is there. Bonds, Forex, futures, in off of any exchange in the world. Any experience with S&P and IQ Capital? Well, I just answered that. How to build thorough finance knowledge? What would you recommend? Well, you're going through CFA. You're on the path, but CFA is it's sort of codified knowledge. So codified means it's something we know that's written down, and here you go. This is what you need to know. And then there is a bunch of knowledge that is not yet codified because it's still in practice. So we haven't really gotten to it. So you'll notice that in the curriculum, there's not a lot about crypto because we're not quite sure whether crypto is going to be a thing or not. We're pretty sure the blockchain is something. And I think the blockchain has a lot of power in the future when it comes to verifying or to have verifiable elections. I think if each individual could be identified on the blockchain, you can vote online. Anybody can vote right off their phone for the election. You don't have to worry about election integrity. So I think the blockchain has lots of great applications in its future, but nobody knows much about crypto. So you're not going to read a lot or learn a lot in CFA about that because it is emerging knowledge that's not yet codified. But if it is codified in the books, that's because, hey, this is the stuff that exists that you better know this stuff because you're going to bump into this stuff. But you're also going to bump into new stuff that's not here. So you do have to have a foot in the real world while you're doing this at the same time. Are you still in the REITs? I'm surprised how much they crash when rents and inflation indexed. Yeah, I'm still in the REITs because I think it's been overdone, especially apartment REITs. Housing REITs in the US, I'm a little shy on right now because they, depending on where they are, there's huge property tax increases coming through. Office REITs, mixed. I've seen some that have been reporting negative NOI growth year over year. And not just one or two here or there, but a good mixture of the office REITs are reporting negative NOI growth year over year. That's not good. But the ones that are killing it, the industrial REITs are just killing it. That's warehouses and logistics. Retail is holding up pretty good. I don't like covered malls. I much prefer the open air shopping centers, the strip malls and the open air shopping centers to covered malls. But apartment REITs, why they're selling off, other than an increase in the discount rate, I don't get that. I think they're just a buying opportunity. So yeah, I've been buying REITs because it's giving me no choice. It's giving me a market where it's saying, what do you want to do? I was buying the mining companies when they were selling a BHP, Rio, Freeport, and the ETF pick. I had access to all of them. Exposure to all of them. And Friday was just absolutely beautiful for the miners. Freeport was up, 12% alone in one day. So, I think the home builders are in the same situation where it's just overdone. Yeah, things look bad. There's no reason to buy the home builders. And because there's no reason to buy them, that's all the reason in the world I need. You want to buy something when there's no reason to buy it, and you want to sell something when there's no reason to sell it. You have to be contrarian in that way. And yeah, Friday was a beautiful day for that. Beautiful day. I think we've got everything here, right? What do you think about Powell's comments this week? I'll be saying something about that tomorrow. Do you have an opinion on the FRM certificate and risk management in general? Yeah, I do, actually, because I see this a lot in what I do. A lot of my trades, especially in markets like this, a lot of them are risk management motivated, not return motivated, but I make a return. If you manage risk, return will take care of itself because the market will be what the market will be. The market will return what it returns. Apple will be what Apple will be. But if you manage the risk of your exposures and you manage the distribution of returns, where you look at a distribution, you say, well, okay, this is the only part of the distribution I'm concerned about, not this. I'm going to sell that part of the distribution, or I only really want this part of the distribution. You'll just buy that particular part of the distribution. So risk management really helps you with a lot of that. But FRM, like CFA, is meant for an institutional investor. So it will give you a higher level institutional view on risk management. And since it doesn't know where you're going, it has to assume maybe you're going to be in a bank. Maybe you're going to be an insurance company. Maybe you're going to be running a portfolio of fixed income securities. So it doesn't know where you're going. So it gives you a whole bunch of stuff. But as far as a retail investor, it's probably a lot of overkill that after you learn it, you'd have to kind of bring it down to the retail level somehow. And there are many things in FRM that you would just say, other than knowing how this business manages risk, that if I were an investor in a bank, I know how they manage risk. It makes reading their 10Q and their 10K easier because now I can understand the language that they're using. But other than that, it doesn't benefit me directly. Let's see. Have you done psychoanalysis? Nope. No, not that I'm aware of. What is your height? Almost 6'1". How do you build through finance knowledge? Oh, I already answered that. Answered that. Answered that. Answered that. Okay, we're going to end it here soon. We're 4:53, coming up on, well, 2 hours, 53 minutes into this, but there's still 214 people on, so I guess that's good. Will finance jobs be impacted with the evolving AI? And if yes, then how can we as students prepare for it? Good question. I think what gave AI a very good leg up in finance over the last 15 years was the almost predictability of the markets, when central banks were just sitting on the zero curve, or on the zero line, is that markets just went up. So you could program a lot in, but that's not the case anymore. It's a lot harder to play. That I think that, passive management ruled the last decade. I think the next decade is going to be active management, because passive is going to have, I think, single digit returns. I don't know that algorithmic trading can advance to the level to make the kind of decisions that are necessary in an active market, not active market, but in an active portfolio. So I don't know. I think, it's like that. I think it's from Psalms: to everything there is a season. And, there are intersections of time where this technique just happened to be in the right place at the right time for this, much like the pandemic made Kathy Wood, because she just happened to be in the right place at the right time with the right kind of stocks that just hit. But I don't know so much that she's got legs, in the sense that, it's a viable strategy on a go forward basis that will hit again, unless there is a time. I think there was a time. I think, that the wide acceptance of AI in finance was because of the predictability of markets and the predictability of the central bank for so long. Well, those playbooks are gone. So you have to switch your orientation very quickly. You have to. I don't know that without a history behind it, I don't know if there's the data set to train AI for a world that hasn't yet happened, but is going to be significantly different than the one we just left. So I think, it has a place. It had an elevated place for a while. Now I think it's going to return to some mean reverting level of where its place happens to be. Or it could take over the world. What are you reading? Latest book? Were you always an avid reader? What do you think about dimming down your language? Dimming down? I often received the request to replace words. Well, I've always sort of followed that if there's a simpler word that means the same thing, use the simpler word. In our quote of the day on our site, we have on our site, we have a little inspirational quotes. There's one that says, never use utilize when you can utilize use. Meaning, if you're going to have a sentence and you're going to use the word utilize, use the word use. Never use utilize when you can utilize use, which is supposed to be a joke, because I'm using utilize in the sentence where I'm saying you shouldn't. But, keeping it simple makes a lot of sense. So here's the thing, and I've told students this many, many times, is in your life, you're going to seek to say some very important things. The burden should not be on the listener to try to understand you. The burden should be on you to be understandable. So let's take Kierkegaard, for example, and I've used Kierkegaard as an example before. Amazing philosopher, incredible things to say, but bloody difficult to read. I mean, you got to invest in this guy to read this. I mean, you've got to dive deep. Well, I'm not going to do it. And I never did. So he's not really an A-lister philosopher. He's maybe a B-lister. But had he written to be understood, had he written to be more accessible, he would have been far more popular. If you say, quote Kierkegaard, who the bloody can quote? Who can quote Kierkegaard for Christ? You can't even understand what he was saying. You got to paraphrase the guy. So, there's not a lot of cats hanging from a wire with a Kierkegaard quote under it. You're not going to find that. So there is some truth in try not to be too pretentious in your speech. There is a great poem, by the way, that sort of makes the same point by I think it's Rudyard Kipling. I think it's called is it called If, or is it called A Poem to My Son, or You'll Be a Man, or something? I forget what it is, but it is of the, there's a line that says, if you can walk with kings but not lose the common touch. Well, that's exactly it. Walking with kings means to elevate your mind, but don't lose the common touch, so that you can still have conversations with real people. So it's okay to be smarter than other people. It is not okay to continually let them know that you're smarter. So to speak in a language that's accessible, I don't see it as dumbing down my language. I see it as opening up to be more accessible to a wider group and dropping the pretentiousness. Sure, I can use a big word, but you got to pick and choose your audience. If I'm at an academic conference, I'm going to speak their language, and I'm going to have no fear that they're going to understand my language. And sometimes a bigger word encapsulates a larger concept than a smaller word would. But if you're talking to just people on the street, drop the pretension. Just seek to be understood as clearly as you can, because nothing cuts through bullshit like clarity, right? So I hope that answers the question. When we have future live episodes? That's a good question. This is fun. I actually enjoy doing this. I think that, being live online and answering a bunch of questions is a better use of my time than doing the Q&A video I do midweek. I think this is sort of a better way to do it. But I have to elevate the process here, right? This is YouTube Live. This is the default YouTube Live setting. It's a camera looking at me, and that's it. That's it. I can't use my writing tablet. I'll just show you what it looks like here, so that I have one of these, right? And you can, you can't really see it right now, but this is what I use. It's a Cintiq. It's what I use to create all my screens. Well, YouTube just shines a camera at me. It doesn't do a screen capture. So if I could go live on a screen capture, I could capture this. You can do it, but you have to buy some other software first that then generates that to send into a live stream. So if I were going to do more of it, I would do it the other way by looking more into, well, what layer of software do I need to make something better than me just sitting in front of a camera? Because if I need to describe a concept, I got to use my hands. I'd rather just draw a picture, right? Does accelerated depreciation appear on the book version of the income statement, or only on the tax version? I see what you're saying. Is it only in financial reporting, or is it in the tax version? Listen, for the reporting, there are certain depreciation methods that a company can choose, and they choose the one that matches the economic life of the asset, let's say, whatever method that happens to be. However, when you're taking depreciation for tax purposes, there is a description of this asset that has a certain code, and there's a certain depreciation you take, and that's it. There is no deciding on what your depreciation method is. It's dictated to you what your depreciation is. So for tax purposes, it is different than what you would do for reporting purposes, because it is whatever the tax code says. So usually deferred tax assets and deferred tax liabilities would typically arise, usually because of differences in depreciation methods or differences in things like, well, here's an impairment charge on my asset. Well, that may not be a recognizable charge for tax purposes, because if an impairment charge was recognized for taxes, you never have to pay tax because, oh, look at this, I got an impaired asset. Ah, God, look at this, I got another impaired asset. Look at all these impaired assets I got. Sorry, I don't owe you any money this year. So it can't possibly be something like that, right? Let's see. What are my current investments? I have exposure to home builders, exposure to materials sector, to miners. I still have auto exposure through GM and Ford, mostly with sold puts. What else do I have? Healthcare sector at the sector level. I've got utilities at the sector level. Mexican peso, which has just been beautiful on the Mexican peso. Strongest performing currency this year globally, I think. Geez, what else have I got? Lots on the SPY, mostly risk management on the SPY, selling calls and puts, different parts of the distribution. Down. I opened up puts on. Calls. I did calls on the IYR. 85 calls for 83 calls for November. I sold the 83 calls on IYR for November. I did that on Friday. I'm long REITs. If REITs keep going up, great. If they don't, there's my hedge, right? So any plans to join politics? No, I'm too good for politics. Let's see. And I think that's it. What percentage of your investments in SPY? 0% in SPY. I don't invest in SPY. I use SPY to manage risk. So I don't invest in SPY. I will sell calls and puts to manage the level of dollar delta beta I want in my portfolio. Okay. Any other level 3 questions that I missed here? Okay. Well, that's it. So it is 5:06. This was 3 hours and 6 minutes. I'm going to end the stream in a few minutes here. Yeah. And that's it. I'll probably do another one at some point. This was fun, but it'll be more market related. I don't know that it'll be CFA related. It'll be market related. And this will be, I don't know how long YouTube takes to make it live. Once I click end stream, I guess it has to edit and render the whole thing. It's 3 hours long. It might be a couple hours before it shows up, but I'm going to scroll down to the last few comments here. I'm going to take off, and I see that everybody is okay with me taking off. Okay. Count down from 5, and it'll be all over. Oh, somebody said social issues discussion, please. Yeah, I can do that. I can take some time and make the next one on this whole idea of socialism versus capitalism, and I can prove that socialism is the dumbest idea in the world. All right. Ciao.